Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel, I'm a Cartoonist. Chapter 71. Roar. Like the roar of an ancient behemoth, the rising waves of air shattered the church glass, and the smashed fragments poured down like a shower, and fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Wow, baby, how come you can regenerate like your mother? You deserve to be a son. The dead servant who had cut twice fell on the ground, and saw that the poisonous knight's neck began to recover, and he began to release painful mouths. Dai has never been humiliated like this before, and Deadpool's yellow storm poison cannon is simply a weapon to injure the enemy 1,000. I'm going to tear your mouth apart, and die for me. The angry poisonous knight swung his hands like a black whip, and the huge black thorns poured down like a majestic mountain. Rumble. With a loud and deafening noise, a big hole was directly smashed into the surface of the church, and cobweb-like cracks spread out everywhere. 7. Deadpool lay on the ground in embarrassment, and the blood converged into a creek, only feeling that the bones were all broken, the skin was open and fleshy, and his whole body couldn't move. Dead. Why don't you keep talking? What mercenary? Scoff. Dai sneered, because the dominant body didn't use Thompson's brain to think about problems, and his intelligence plummeted. After all, it was really a single-celled organism. Even if you have known many civilizations, your knowledge will increase but your IQ will not increase. Jin Muyan's face changed, and he secretly said, "Opportunity." The whole person dragged the long red tail to turn into a meteor, and all the speed and power exploded. Bang! Before Dai finished speaking, a red light flashed, and a violent pain stretched from the abdomen to the neck, and the black substance poured out like a wild ocean. The black fluid was spilled on the floor, and it squirmed from time to time after falling. Hey, I'll send it too. Deadpool had already got up and rushed up alive. The light of the knife pierced through the night, the air was stirred, and he swung a long knife at the ankle of the knight. The blade of the high-speed slash carried air pressure into it, and the incomparably hard black shell was cut into the Hado road, and even sparks were splashed. On the other side, Jin Muyan was completely changed. The red eyes of his right eye exuded evil light, and 2 Kazas appeared behind him, and the 6 scales were dark red. At this time, it was wrapped into a hammer and pierced deeply into the body of Toxic Knight. The whole person's hideous face turned into an unconscious violent state, rushing from the abdomen to the neck like an alien climbing, and the cracks behind him all the way up. From a distance, it looked as if Poison Yi had been dissected, and a huge, narrow opening was actually cut. The paddling Peter was stunned, his eyes were about to fly out of his sockets. How could this Jin Muyan be so different from the weak look in his mind? He even felt that this was not Jin Muyan, not the number. Du Yi was furious with anger when faced with the attack of the two. His tongue ejected and flogged at Jin Muyan, and at the same time, his feet suddenly stretched out with black tentacles towards the Deadpool bag. Jin Mu jumped up, and the 6 linas were scattered and spun out at the same time. The pink tongue and the dark red line he collided in the air. Boom! In the next instant, a thin ring of air exploded at the point of collision. After a stalemate, Jin Muyan flew upside down like a kite that lost the line. In the blink of an eye, the body of the poisonous knight flew out and slammed through the church wall. The streets outside. Golden wood. Peter could only sigh that the situation was changing rapidly, and the golden wood that had just torn open his mouth was bounced off, and he seemed to be of no use here and ran out hastily. As for the mercenaries who asked for money just now, it seems that they are dead. Hey, fake, leave me here alone, and I was tied up by the monster playing. Deadpool is now tightly wrapped in layers of black thread tentacles, lifted up in the air, struggling to shout. Little spider, you deserter, I must take you 1 million. Baby, discuss something as long as you don't burst below me, whatever else you want. While speaking, Deadpool's legs clenched, and the head wrapped in the red headgear was slightly shy to one side. While speaking, Deadpool's legs clenched, and the head wrapped in the red headgear was slightly shy to one side. As if to say again, come and be happy. I'm here. The magma in the heart that Dai was hit by the poisonous tongue of the dead servant's mouth suddenly erupted, and he held onto the dead servant tightly in a rage. Click. The bones creaked and all cracked, and Deadpool was firmly grasped by the huge hand, and the unparalleled power spread throughout Deadpool's body. Dead. Die. Ah. Male sign. Du Yi clenched his fists tightly, and the dead waiter wailed tragically in it, which sounded a little weird. He could feel that the mercenary in his hand had indeed become a puddle of mud and then opened. That's right, it's totally unrecognizable, and there is no human form at all. Taking into account the powerful regenerative ability, Dai squeezed it again, thinking it was not enough to twist his hands tightly. Finally dead. Dai shook the mud in his hand without a scream, and slammed it down hard, smashing a hole with a bang, feeling a little angry. He slammed in, and then studied and polished it. After doing the above actions, Dai calmed down and exhaled for a long time. No one cannot be angry under the poison cannon of Deadpool, especially for the self-proclaimed #1 person in the world like Dai. In the streets not far away, Peter was looking for an inverted flight, and he saw Jin Muyan lying on the ground covered in blood. Jin Mu, are you okay? Peter passed a cold coat wrapped around him along the way, and helped Jin Mu up. Call. Jin Mu suddenly raised his head, his eyes glowing fiercely, his face paler, and he looked at Peter deeply, panting. Peter felt a little uncomfortable by this stare, his expression seemed abnormal, and he smiled timidly. Jinmu, are you okay? The current Jin Muyan walked out of the six-rooted centipede state due to force and violence. He was unconscious and in a state of unconscious instinct. Despair. The slender hand grabbed Peter's shoulder, and the fierce golden wood made Peter feel his throat. You should know that he doesn't even have spider silk, and Jin Muyan wants to eat his flesh. Does it require Shumo to pay compensation after death? Peter really wants to cry for, what's the matter? At this moment, a huge shadow passed by, and 3 beans fell from the sky with a click. To Peter's surprise, the beans didn't bounce, and they actually lay on the ground. There was also a slight shake. Jin Muyan wrinkled his nose, as if smelling some delicious food, grabbed 3 beans and swallowed it directly, his face flushed as if he was eating a big pill. Peter is a little confused, isn't he cannibalism? Why do beans smell so good? Before Jin Muyan's body changed, the sound of buzzing airflow was blasted in the distance, and when Peter looked up, cold sweat suddenly broke out from his back. The spider felt its hair exploded. Hold head high. The dragon sounded like thunder, and the stone broke the sky. Aerospace carrier. Natasha, have you kept up? Nick Fury stood on the console, looked at the high-definition screen, and asked Natasha among the Coon fighters thousands of miles away. Dark clouds billowed in the night sky, and a Coon fighter was flying fast in it, and a huge black shadow was directly in front of him. Natasha chased Kaido. We are chasing, but the opponent's speed is so fast, we were hung far behind. Hawkeye was sitting on the co-pilot and using the equipment to look from a distance, and said in amazement, according to the results of the instrument scanning, this behemoth has a very high energy response inside. Wait, there seems to be a huge black monster inside a collapsed building in the distance. The target dropped, and he swooped toward the black monster. Listening to Hawkeye's series of reports, Nick Fury stared at the ultra-clear screen. Rumble, hold head high, the dragon roars like thunder, and the clouds roar for 9 days. The venom had just stepped on Deadpool, and the spider on his body suddenly felt vigilant, and the high-altitude clouds and mist not far away rolled, the sonic boom suddenly sounded, and he quickly looked back. I saw a silver-white monster swooping down. At this moment, the silver-white monster roared in the sky, and the airflow rolled by the sound waves was surging, and the whole ground was shrouded in shadow. The gusty wind roared, and a wonderful light curtain appeared under the moonlight slowly mirroring. An extremely huge momentum poured down, and the air became heavy at this moment. The sound of the huge destruction caused by the venom caused many people running out of the streets to sweat their backs, their limbs cold, and their bodies shivering. An unspeakable sense of fear arises spontaneously. This is the difference between races and the surrender of lower creatures to higher creatures. Dai was unwilling to show weakness and roared with his blood in his mouth. Roar! The silver-white monster was not afraid. Still leaning over and rushing down, Dai slammed his fists hard when he saw it. Bang! In the next moment, the silver-white monster's head collided with the pitch-black fists, and a sudden burst of violent power swept away in all directions, crushing the ground with a madness, and rubbing out a cobweb-like crack. However, Dai discovered at this time that the silver-white monster was even bigger than it, and a powerful force invaded into the body along its arms. The poisonous knife flew upside down like a cannonball and blasted into the ground heavily. In the shock of everyone, the silver-white monster gathered its wings to cover the sky and fell on the ground, causing a gust of wind and smoke. "Chief, did you see it?" Natasha controlled the Coon-type fighter plane to hover in the distance. Nick Fury responded softly on the air carrier. His face was very ugly. He didn't even know where these two monsters came from. Is it an alien or an Earth native? Dai turned over and pulled out his head, and said angrily, "Who is it again?" The blue-eyed white dragon did not respond, but instead made a deafening roar of the dragon's roar. Everyone on the ground covered their ears with a powerful sound, as if they were facing each other into an ice cellar. Venom seemed to see the disdain of the Qingyan Beilong towards it, and turned into a black meteor in a blink of an eye, and came to the Qingyan Beilong in a blink of an eye. His hands instantly turned into warhammers, slammed down, and the squeezed air buzzed. Seeing this, the blue-eyed white dragon just waved his paw and slapped forward randomly. With a bang, in the sight of Peter Parker and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Poison Yi was shot and flew out. The movements of the blue-eyed white dragon seemed very random, as if the opponent was too weak. The movements of the blue-eyed white dragon seemed very random, as if the opponent was too weak. When Peter turned his head to say something, only then did he realize that Jin Mu had a different aura and looked even stronger. Jin Mu looked at the lingering Coon-style fighter from a distance, then backed up a few steps, hiding in the dark. Venom slowly got up and stared at the blue-eyed white dragon, knowing that the gap between the two sides was beginning to retreat, but the young white dragon seemed to guess his thoughts and took a step forward, and the knight took a step back. The eyes of the blue-eyed Beilong showed contemptuous eyes, and suddenly the whole body violently turned into a silver-white light from static to moving. It just rushed to the Venom in an instant and raised sharp claws exuding deep cold. This scene is exactly the same as the previous poisonous knight's attack, but the result is bound to be different. Bang! A whine resounding between the world and the earth, the only huge body was turned into another block by spinning like a top. "What the hell is this? It looks a bit like a dragon," Peter murmured softly. This is also the idea of Nick Fury. The Venom began to fear. He could not see the slightest possibility of winning in the young white dragon. Black matter began to flow all over his body, and the tentacles of black threads stretched out and converged into two wings. Spreading his wings and glaring at the ground, he set off a gust of wind and rushed into the sky. The blue-eyed white dragon did not chase, just when the others were a little confused. The eyes of the blue-eyed white dragon shone with blue light, lifting the dragon head, facing the Venom that was gradually flying away, spreading row upon row of teeth. A wave of dazzling white energy gathered. Explosive blast bomb. A white-blue beam of light burst out like a bridge between heaven and earth, and it quickly caught up with the distant poisonous knight. Danger. Extremely dangerous. The spider on Venom's body kept sending out signals. Hearing the sound of breaking clouds behind him, he couldn't help turning his head. His pupils suddenly shrank to a point, and a vast expanse of whiteness rushed into its sight. Boom! The thunder-like sound of Pingdi runs through the entire world, and Poison Yi is buried under the explosion of the wind bomb, and there is no possibility of regeneration. The sky soared into the sky, and the white-blue rays of light attacked the entire cloud layer, just like the sun. The dazzling circular shock wave exploded fiercely, and the clouds dispersed, looking from a distance as if the sky was blown into a hollow. Immediately afterwards, the overwhelming air wave hit the surface, and the wind screamed. Fortunately, the explosion point was located high in the sky, and the citizens on the surface were not affected too much. Then the blue-eyed white dragon spread out its wings to cover the sky and rushed to the sky. When Natasha controlled the Coon-type fighter to catch up to the clouds, she found that the target suddenly disappeared. Hawkeye exclaimed, "How could it be possible that such a large body has no trace under the surveillance of satellites?" On the aerospace carrier, Collison frowned tightly, thinking about the appearance and posture of the blue-eyed white dragon in his mind. "I always feel like I've seen it before, but I can't say it. Do dragons all look like this?" Collison was a little puzzled, and suddenly a picture flashed, making his face pale. Jin Mu, where did Jin Mu go? I haven't asked him whether it is Jin Mu Yan in the comics. Peter said to the side, only then did he realize that the golden wood had disappeared, a little annoyed. After thinking about it, why not just ask Shumo? Church ruins. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents pulled up the blockade to prevent people from entering. Natasha and others patrolled inside. The staff was busy collecting useful information. Some black blocks were stored in a sealed bag and taken back for inspection. Sir, we found the living body and, an agent stepped forward to report. Natasha led people to walk over quickly, her face stagnated. Wow, I saw a pretty girl as soon as I came out. Deadpool was twisting and twisting naked, his mouth was still full of gunfire, and what made Natasha disgusting was that his face was still so terrifying. Dye couldn't kill him, it just made him recover more slowly. It happened to be the person who discovered the silk-like clothes during the blockade of S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha was frosty and let Deadpool be tied up and taken away. Although she didn't know how she was here, she was also an eyewitness to the dark monster. Shumo stood on the balcony and looked towards the endless night. The white hole in the night sky still flickered faintly. Call out. There was a sound of breaking through the air in midair, and white light flew at extremely fast. Shumo quickly pinched 2 fingers in his hand. It's a card, blue-eyed white dragon. Shumo didn't wait long before Jinmuyan jumped up to him in the distance. Thanks, Jinmu. Shumo stepped forward, patted his shoulder, a little depressed, and said, I didn't expect Dai to be so powerful. I'm so sorry, I asked him to send Hebao. Well, I'm going to eat, now I need a little quiet environment. Jin Muzi didn't mind, the feeling of discomfort behind him made his face flushed. Okay, there is. Shumo, let me go into the warehouse. It's quiet enough. Jin Mu interrupted directly, and a crimson Kazuko suddenly spread behind him and began to swell. It is good. As soon as Shumo waved his hand, Jin Muyan disappeared, and then appeared on the warehouse interface and turned into a cartoon man in an independent space. The warehouse of the system is not a small black room with nothing. On the contrary, after entering the warehouse, it can be transformed according to the requirements of the characters themselves. It can be said to be very humane performance. However, it is impossible to stay in the warehouse for a long time, because there is no one in it, and it is very boring to be alone with the sky and the earth. As for the blue-eyed white dragon, the card is its residence. Therefore, Shumo will not force conscious summons to be stuffed in the warehouse, but it is an excellent place for Jin Muyan on the edge of evolution. It seems that I was holding back before. Shumo scratched his head and secretly said, will Jin Mu suffocate the kidney? No, Lin He will grow from here. After Jin Muyan left, Alice appeared next to Shumo, frowning humanely. Shumo, you have been exposed by doing this. What exposed? Shumo leaned over to adjust the projection of the crystal ball without raising Kaido. Alice walked back and forth, reminding, you let the blue-eyed white dragon go out and show up in front of S.H.I.E.L.D., you must know that they are not blind. And then, Shumo remained unmoved, swiping the projection to zoom in and then zoom in, the clouds inside were surging. You are pretty smart on weekdays, why are you a fool now? Exposure means that you will have a group of people in black knocking on the door tomorrow morning, and may also seal your company. Shumo couldn't help laughing when he heard the words. After connecting the touch points on the projection, the image of the aerospace carrier appeared. The non-chief chief is very excited. He drove all the big guys over Manhattan and was ready to launch a large-scale weapon at any time, but this happened to be within the scope of the telescope technique. Shumo, did you listen? Forget it. I don't care about you. Alice slapped the table angrily, but passed through. The light and shadow collapsed into particles and then recovered. Don't worry, in fact, the non-chief will help me answer my answer. You can only say that you don't understand humans. Don't worry, in fact, the non-chief will help me answer my answer. You can only say that you don't understand humans. Shumo touched the crystal ball, projecting a picture of Nick Fury. Alice's face had no choice but to stare at it, and it looked more and more like Gary, except for eating. Aerospace carrier. Nick Fury pointed to the scene of the blue-eyed white dragon appearing in the comics while holding the juvenile Jump comic magazine Yu-Gi-Oh! And said with no expression on his face. Coelson, you mean that the silver and white monster that just appeared as a character from the comics? Director, after comparison, the two have reached 90% similarity, so. Collison explained. So you said that this monster is a blue-eyed white dragon, so this cartoonist has superpower that summons characters from the comics. Nick Fury took it, muffled Kaido, is that so? Collison responded decisively, yes. In this case, he is the god of the entire world, and you also find that other comic characters have not appeared in reality. Nick Fury stood up and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, speaking in a low voice. As a god, I draw comics every day. You believe? Collison was speechless for a while, and then turned to wonder, then how can the two be the same? Since he is not a god, then he has either seen the blue-eyed white dragon and then painted him in, or he has the blue-eyed white dragon and specially drew comics. Nick Fury closed one eye and asked, which one do you think it is? Natasha came in and leaned on the table with a charming smile. Why don't I go to lie down? I believe it should be the first one. No, I think it's the second one. Even he knows a lot of people who have adapted paintings. This means that he has more power than S.H.I.E.L.D., and as far as this dragon is concerned, it can completely destroy aircraft carriers. Nick Fury opened his one eye and spoke quietly. Hill also interjected. Diaresis, since you are not sure, should you let him lie down here? It means to grab it directly. Hill must be cautious. If it is the first type, it will be fine, but if it is the second type? If the big SHI? Is it possible that the nuclear bomb is dropped here? Whether it can be aimed or not is still a problem, not to mention the Fantastic Four who have refused to establish an ally with us because of the last incident. Nick Fury is careful throughout his life, never trying to beat the big one. He will only do it when something is more than 80% successful. The probability of this matter is not calculated at all, and he will never rush in and arrest someone when his head is hot. He is not stupid as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., how could he be promoted without a little ink? In this way, Natasha, you can sneak into the company to check it, and at the same time temporarily raise Shumo's risk level to level 8. You can't do it without an order. Since I didn't do anything, I secretly searched for clues. Look, Alice, this is human. Shumo pointed to the projection. Wang Wanghao spread his hand. How is it possible to do this? This kind of reason is too reluctant. Alice frowned, she couldn't see through. It's actually very simple. He waits until the team is established, and then he will force it. Now he is just a little cat. Shumo turned off the projector, drove Alice out to accompany Jiali, and went to bed with the lights off. In fact, what Nick Fury can do is to block the company, but he will not do it. In Nick Fury's view, blocking the company is not as cost-effective as sending a female agent to spy on intelligence. Shumo's eyes twinkled with stars, and he looked at the night sky, where the clouds of the sky aircraft carrier. Nick Fury was completely led by his nose when he founded the new company. I am a cat now and want to be a tiger in the future, but suddenly realized that the tiger in the future is nothing at all. Nick Fury lost right from the start. Next day. Marvel Comics. Hello everyone, my name is Jin Muyan, from Dongying. Jin Muyan smiled gently. He wears a mushroom head, the top of his hair is black, while the sides of the bangs and sideburns are white, and he wears a black base shirt and a white mid-length trench coat. Shumo, with a satisfied look on the side, walked up to the stage and greeted all the staff. Jin Mu is the youngest of you, don't bully him. Where, there is such a cute boy. He must be a little boy and a little boy. Don't worry, no one will bully him with me. Uncle Andy walked over and said with a guarantee. Jinmu is a black household in the United States, but under the operation of Skynet, it has become a white household that can no longer be white, and his life experience is miserable and touches the world. Jin Muyan was a little depressed and said, Shumo. It's okay, you can do all these tasks well, for the company. Shumo patted Jin Muyan on the shoulder to encourage him, and then left his tearful eyes and fled. Haha, you may be a little uncomfortable when you first enter the society, come here, and today there is a new person who just happened to meet. Andy talked happily, and walked into a very mature woman with big red wavy hair, flaming red lips, devilish body, slender thighs wearing scarlet short skirts, highlighting the exquisite beauty. As soon as the woman came in, the sun was overshadowed. All the women couldn't help but bow their heads, while the men spit down their throats like male dogs in heat. Ahem. Andy, who had seen him once earlier, coughed heavily. All the talents reacted and started to work, but their eyes swept over frequently. Come on, you all joined on the same day, he is Jin Muyan. She is Natalie Rushman, and she will be a colleague after meeting. After Andy introduced them separately, after a few conversations, he turned and left. I'll just call you Jinmu, how about little brother? Natalie smiled without showing her teeth, twiddled her hair, said softly, and at the same time stretched out her pink and slender hand. This tone is full of charm, as permeating as a superb rose. When Jin Muyan heard it, there was a slight curve on his face, but he kept complaining about Shumo for giving him such a dangerous task. CIAC. If one is not good, chastity will be lost. The woman in front of me was not Natalie Rushman but Natasha Romanoff. 10th level shield agent. Since Shumo knew that shield agents were lurking in, how could he let him be unprepared? Since there were not many people under him, they had to send the only admiral, Jin Muyan. As long as Kaneki doesn't wear a mask to reveal Kazuko, no one knows his true face, and now this is the appearance of joining CCG and becoming Sasaki. The comics were just unfolding and it was far too far. Jin Mu himself didn't know that it would grow like this in the future. It can be said that no one but Peter knew that this was Jin Muyan. Perhaps it might not be recognized by Peter. Jin Mu, you are a good friend of mine. Now the chance for my friend to be in trouble has arrived. Come on, Jinmu, I believe you can defeat this evil agent. The words Shumo confessed to him this morning flashed in Jin Muyan's mind, but it was useless, just pushing him into the pit. Kaido said with a smile of Jin Mupi, well, I'm going to work first. Instead of stepping forward to shake hands, he left quietly. Kaido said with a smile of Jin Mupi, well, I'm going to work first. Instead of stepping forward to shake hands, he left quietly. Quote. Too small. No feeling. Natasha looked at Jin Muyan's distant back and was a little surprised. This was the first time someone ignored her appearance. She deliberately dressed as a personal assistant who hoped to be employed by the boss, but she didn't expect Shumo to not paint at all in the company. It's too bad, so I just apply for other positions and let's talk about it first. Maybe it's because you are too young to reach puberty. No, this age should be a time of restlessness. It's kind of interesting. It was Shumo who recommended the job, and he started the investigation. Natasha left with a catwalk twisting and twisting, leaving only a regretful producer and a roaring team leader. Time quickly passed by Shimon for lunch. The company opened a canteen for meals due to the expansion of staff and Rijin Dujin. Instead of ordering, he picked up his backpack and left the company. Natasha, who was preparing to order, was taken aback, but she was not curious. I don't want to eat too much in the cafeteria. Jin Muyan walked on the street looking at the bustling and prosperous scene, but he was thinking of his own past in his mind. Can't help but sigh. Jin Mu sat down in a restaurant and ordered a simple and clear order, a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee. Jin Mu raised his head and looked at the man sitting opposite him, wearing a pair of black glasses, dark skin, and a strong body. Looks like a ruthless character. Jin Mu just glanced at it and then lowered his head to play with the phone. After 2 cups of coffee were served, he was about to reach out and pick it up. The man opposite wrinkled his nose and said in a low voice, I smell a very strong smell of blood, what did you eat this morning? Jin Mu's hand was stagnant, and then he just glanced at the man as if he didn't respond, and took a sip. Don't speak, it doesn't matter, I can smell it no matter what you eat. The man didn't touch the coffee at all, but put one hand on the table and the other in the back pocket of his pants. He said coldly, that's human flesh. Jin Mu still didn't change his face and didn't respond. He drank his coffee in his own way, as if he didn't hear it at all. But 2 small hills began to slowly protrude behind him, and the red traces covered by the clothes became more and more obvious. Just when the two didn't talk at all, but they were at a stretch. Jin Mu, why are you drinking coffee here? Natasha stepped over. She was out to observe the surroundings of the building, but she did not expect to meet Jin Mu. The tense atmosphere was suddenly disintegrated by this shield agent. The man stood up without saying a word, looked at Jin Muyan deeply when he turned his head, and then left. Who is he? Natasha guessed secretly. Call. Jin Mu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If there is a real contradiction, his Kazuko will be exposed. This place is near Times Square, crowded with people. His task is to get the company to publish comics stably. Natasha's lurking is actually a waste of thought, and the company has no confidential documents or useful clues. Shumo asked him to come to the company only to prevent Natasha from investigating him, turning no clues into clues. Once there are clues, it is necessary to continue lurking. Shield Bureau will not suddenly want to close the company one day. Otherwise, the agent is not exhausted abandoned. Jin Mu calmly finished his coffee, opened his cute eyes, and secretly said, "Is this woman a real coincidence? Is it on purpose?" And Natasha had already remembered the face of the dark man with her extraordinary memory, and planned to go back and search the information database. The two of them walked into the company side by side, and no matter how Natasha tempted Jinmu along the way, Jinmu was an elm wood. "Let your hoe swing well, I just don't eat this one. Bai Wawa's steamed buns are not delicious, you think you are Dong Shong." Just as Jin Muyan and Natasha's latent and anti-latent decoy plans were stalemate, Shumo of course was a beautiful paddling. "Master, please give an order." A muscular man with the appearance of Schwarzenegger appeared in front of Shumo. He was the Terminator T-800. "Feel, it's a bit useless." Shumo touched his chin and said depressed, "T-800 is not that TX has no liquid metal to change, only one face needs to be repaired if it is broken. If ordinary people get it, they will be happy, but for Shumo, it will be useless. It is impossible to throw it away, or keep it in the warehouse for dust. Or, just draw it." Shumo ordered T-800 to sit on the extra desk and copy the faint traces. Sure enough, it is a robot, there is no difference in copying, and it can be copied all the time without using a clone if there is electricity. Shumo is also thinking about plans for the next issue on his desk. Juvenile Jump is currently serializing 6 books including One Punch, Giant, Ghoul, Naruto, Shinigami, and Yu-Gi-Oh! There are 24 chapters in each of the 4 chapters, which can be said to be the standard of an ordinary comic magazine, but it is not enough for Shumo. There are only 6 books, only 4 more words, especially for the long-length migrant worker comics, even when Thanos snaps his fingers. When the time comes, I will really burn it into paper and send it on. So Shumo plans to increase the update, add another comic, and reduce the number of giant stories. At the beginning, I chose Giant to explode the door of the market and become famous. Now the company is already a golden sign. The low-arm world like Giant can be serialized slowly. Even if it summons a 150-meter-long supergiant in Marvel, it is no use. The raffles are pitifully scarce. Shumo took the paper notes, sorted it out and sent it in writing without explaining it again. Next is the friend Mank, just 2 or too monotonous, especially the Terminator is too short, the next issue will be over. Therefore, it is necessary to launch a new comic, and simply publish 2 good ones. As for which 2 books, it is necessary to think carefully. Then there is animation production. Currently, the animation, One Punch Man, is being advertised online and will be officially broadcast next week. Giant and Ghoul are in production, and then the anime of Shinigami and Naruto. After Shumo made the plan, he used the computer to send it to Andy's mailbox. It's a peaceful life. Shumo lay on the balcony, leisurely and calmly, quoting the collective Byakugan of Lorna, Gally and Alice. Let Shadow Clone do everything by yourself, and even give it to Jinmu. Can you take it easy? It's okay to be idle, or else smoke it. Shumo was a little flustered. When he talked about pumping, he couldn't help pumping. Last time he felt a little bit less and his hands were itchy. Now the fan value has 6.8 million points, just try 1 million and stop. Shumo muttering to himself can't control his addiction to the lottery. Congratulations, host, get any door. Congratulations, host, get any door. Quote. Now it's developed. Shumo turned over and collapsed. There is only 1 prize per million, but this is really worth it. The bright light dissipated, and the long-awaited object appeared in Shumo. The exterior is very huge, with a pink door frame and a door made of black metal inside. Any door. When opening the door, think about the destination, otherwise it will lead to an unpredictable area. Shumo was a little pleased. He put it on the doorknob and turned it slightly. The door began to open, and the 4 holes on the edge sprayed out bursts of steam. Lorna's bedroom. A transparent gap suddenly appeared in the air, forming a frame like air cutting, and then pushed like a door. Shumo poked his head out of it, closing his tongue quickly. It would be bad if Lorna found out. Crunch. Shumo tried a few times at home, and then his mind flashed, why don't you go to an alien planet? The sandal star in the movie feels that the scenery is good. Shumo thought of this, but he reapplied the doorknob but found that the door could not be opened. Host, the effective range of any door is 10 light years, and the planet is far beyond the range. 10 light years, that's a bit, forget it, just find it casually. Movie clips flashed in Shumo's mind, but at the end he didn't know where he thought of going. The door was released and he pushed open. Shumo stepped out of the gray planet, full of dust flying, and yellow sand all around. Call. Shumo walked a few steps forward and saw some large buildings appear in his sight, which looked much higher than the earth. Now as a relic, when you look up, you can see the earthy yellow star rings of the planet. It's boring. After Shumo visited the area, he didn't see anything worth visiting, and there was no beautiful scenery. He was ready to return on the same route. Yeah, this place has always been boring. A muffled and low voice suddenly sounded behind Shumo. Quote. Shumo suddenly felt the horror, cold sweat on his forehead, and a panic of terror in his heart. He didn't find anyone there at all. A figure appeared just as soon as he turned his head. How could this be possible? I'm curious why you are here. The voice behind him asked again. It's been a long time since no one else has come to this planet. I will come to see this past Titan star every year. Titan. Shumo heard the words, turning his head after a pause, as if mechanically stuck, and then a touch of purple still came into view. MMP. It's so big. Purple sweet potato essence is really you. Titans. Call. The sky was full of yellow sand, and the wind was whistling, and the sand was rolled and hit Shumo's body, feeling very painful. An alien with a blue-purple skin, a huge vertical chin, a tall and burly figure, a blue and gold dress with golden shoulder armor and golden short boots appeared in front of him. He is the crazy Titan, and Thanos is Thanos. Shumo's face was frozen and his limbs were stiff. Even though Thanos was still 5 meters away from him, it didn't bring a sense of security. Even if the plot has not yet begun, Thanos may only have spiritual gems in his hands, the human skin, the shadow of the tree, who knows Marvel but does not know Thanos. Thanos seems to be very talkative, or it may be because now he came back to his hometown and met a living person, so he talked about it. The previous Titan is very beautiful, and at the same time it is the most technologically advanced and peace-loving planet in the solar system. Thanos did not step up, just said as he spread his hands as if embracing something. However, this planet disgusts me. Since there is no such word as killing, it's up to me to create it. Deep as an abyss, scarlet eyes stared at Shumo. Then who are you? Inhumans, Earthlings? Thanos stepped forward and asked with doubts on his face. Shumo's heart directly touched his throat. Expressionless Kaido, don't you know? Thanos obviously didn't have any murderous intent, but this creepy feeling let him know the power of Thanos. It seems that you are wary of me. In fact, you just need to talk about the process of landing on Titan without relying on warships. It sounded lightly, but the yellow sand began to fall, and an unspeakable sense of heaviness still rose. Shumo remained silent. Whether it was a comic or a movie, Thanos would destroy half of the universe. Such an overlord said it was okay to believe it. One of the biggest reasons why Thanos has not invaded the Earth to take infinite gems is because of fear of Odin's existence. The Lord of the Nine Realms looked old and weak, but his strength was extremely terrifying, as can be seen from Thanos' invasion after Odin's death. The question is, Thanos appears in the solar system. Does Heimdall, who monitors the movements of the Nine Realms, know about it? But still have to deal with the current situation. Shumo narrowed his eyes and stared at Thanos' hands without gloves. From the outside, he couldn't find the spiritual gem. It's best if you don't take it with you. At present, there is an arbitrary door not far behind him, which is swinging open at this time. As long as Thanos walks to where he is, he can see a spatial passage and an inner bedroom that is completely inaccessible to the surrounding environment. In this way, he can drive straight forward. Whether Thanos is afraid that Odin will not do it, or for another reason, it is impossible for him to discover this door anyway. Shumo quickly calculated that the intense pressure made him have to deal with it in various ways. Earth people can come to Titan without using a warship, and the ability to travel through space is still. Thanos spoke slowly, his face becoming more and more indifferent. He was the overlord of the Dark Quadrant, the king who confronted the Shia Empire chamber in the galaxy. No one dared to disobey, no one dared to refuse, no one dared to ignore it. He will get anything. He knew that there was a space gem on the Earth because this gem was thrown on the Earth by Odin himself, so Thanos didn't rush to think about it. Odin is an old immortal, and his sleep period is getting longer and longer, and he is afraid that he will die soon. Thanos shook his neck and said softly, "Earth, you look like you are traveling. I invite you to sit in my house." At the same time, the big hand pointed at the dark shadow in the distance. That was his battleship. "No, it's time for dinner, I should go back. No, it's time for dinner, I should go back." When Shumo heard this, his eyelids twitched, and he sincerely replied in a perfunctory sentence, saying that his body muscles were tight and he was staring at Thanos intently. "It seems that my orders cannot be passed on to the Earth. Of course, this is the place that Asgard is monitoring. In that case, are you really not going? The time is wrong. Well, if you have to go now." Thanos moved, strode forward, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. "No one has ever dared to refuse my invitation." Shumo moved too and had to move. He couldn't wait for Thanos to come over. He might be able to see any door when he walked halfway. When Thanos saw Shumo coming forward, he smiled faintly. "It's useless to resist. If you don't try, how do you know? Call." The wind roared, the smoke was everywhere, and the yellow sand covering the sky and the sun shrouded the two people's heads, dull, depressed and killing. Shumo decided to take the initiative, not to be led by Thanos, otherwise he would sink deeper and deeper. He moved forward silently from a slow step to a run, and almost instantly turned into a white phantom, and Thanos was extremely arrogant and still stepped on a leisurely pace. "Call out." The strong sound of breaking through the air was left behind, and Shumo crossed the center line in just an instant. Thanos's eyes were calm, just a slam step, leaving a circular pothole suddenly violent, and at the same time he clenched his fist and threw it out. One is white and the other is purple. The two human bodies are very different in shape. The fists with huge differences collided in midair, and time seemed to stagnate into purple and white. In the next instant, a majestic circular shock wave suddenly erupted from the point of collision, and madly poured out toward the surroundings. Rumble. The sound of the wind was obscured, and it exploded like a muffled thunder. The air waves caused by the impact of the yellow sand immediately dissipated directly. The sand was trampled like a beast running, the surface began to deform, and an unfathomable crack that was nearly 100 meters long burst out without warning. This strength. Shumo flew backwards at a faster speed like a cannonball. He was shocked, and immediately realized that Thanos' own strength was far from simple as in the movie. Bang bang bang. Shumo seems to be a rock that was thrown into the lake forcibly, slammed on the sand, and rolled over and over, all the way down. There were pits and pits everywhere. On the other hand, Thanos just slid back a little distance. The power has been crushed. At present, only 2 levels of strange power are completely insufficient. Shumo stood up and stared at Thanos without squinting, secretly calculating that he could only use other methods if he was not strong enough. "Earthman, you are very good, so I have a little interest." Thanos then stepped forward and sneered. "It's still too late to promise." "A little bit of interest. It's too late to take it back." Shumo raised his hand, and a shining white card was sandwiched between his fingers. "Scream, tremble, descend on the blue-eyed white dragon. Hold head high." The roar of a violent behemoth, the powerful momentum condenses, the wings that cover the sky and the sun, the slender body that is 100 meters high, and the deep blue eyes exude endless cold light. The silver-white reflection of the crystal-like body, the body surface is attached like a dazzling guy armor, with row upon row of fangs. The air waves surged, and the settled yellow sand was lifted up again and washed towards Thanos. Shumo frowned, possessing level 4 tenacity and super regeneration skills. The rolling injury just now won't cause much damage to him. But this is not the true power of Thanos, not to mention how the comics are. Just the opening of the movie will knock Hulk off 2 or 3 times, clearly explaining what is powerful. Of course there is also the reason for the power gem. The blue-eyed white dragon is not his trump card. Papa, dragon, interesting. When Thanos saw this, he didn't change his color at all. Instead, he clapped his hands and said calmly, "But this is futile, Earthlings. You need to suffer a little bit." The blue-eyed white dragon heard the threat from Thanos, his blue eyes were even worse, and the ferocious dragon head looked down condescendingly. The white and blue energy particles converged and surging extremely rapidly, the surrounding space was rippled, and the yellow sand was oscillated to disperse. A white energy ball formed between the fangs, and suddenly burst out in the next instant, spewing out a terrifying shock wave, and the air burst into a ring like being stirred. Burst blast bomb. As if the dazzling beam of light from the sky was tearing the air, deafening sonic booms poured down. It engulfed where Thanos was standing like a meteor falling to the ground, and the dazzling white light was as dazzling as the sun emanating from the sky. From a high altitude, the yellow sandy ground suddenly flashed a little white light, followed by a dazzling glare, and the overwhelming momentum with unstoppable power scattered the sky and sand. Rumble. A wave of energy swelled the entire sand like a savage behemoth, raging around the area like a ring. The Earth's surface began to vibrate again, and layers of cracks interlaced each other. When the sand fell like a shower of dust, it was 50 meters wide in diameter, and a bottomless circular pit appeared in front of Shumo. This power is equivalent to 3 LV3 white wave balls. Shumo was slightly surprised, because it was not easy to compare when hitting at high altitude. Now it can be seen at a glance when it hits the ground. This power is not enough. A red light bloomed in the center of the pothole, and as Thanos whispered, the red light became more and more conspicuous and turned into a dazzling ball of light slowly into the sky. In the red ball of light hanging to the same horizontal line stood unharmed Thanos. He looked at Shumo coldly and sneered. "The gap between you and me is too big, give up." Comic again, Marvel Universe. When Shumo saw this, his pupils suddenly shrank into needlepoints, angrily said. Before that, he didn't think that Thanos would be unharmed under the blast bomb. At least the Thanos in the movie would vomit some blood before resisting without wearing gloves. But now it looks extremely relaxed. It's my turn. Hold your breath, concentrate, and don't relax a bit, because... The protective shield gradually dissipated, and Thanos floated down gently, bang. The sound of thunder like sonic boom on the ground exploded in his ears. Purple light, streamer, phantom, none of them just disappeared out of thin air suddenly. None of them just disappeared out of thin air suddenly. Shumo was horrified to find that there was nothing in his dynamic sight, so fast. It was approached at this speed before. The difference in strength will only end the battle in an instant. The second half of the sentence was whispered to the side. Shumo's face was held by a huge purple hand before even the defensive posture could be deployed. At this moment, time seemed to pause. Shumo had only time to widen his pupils in the gap between his fingers, as well as the long-awaited whistling sound. The next second, with a tick, time starts to move. Boom! The violent sandy land resembled a wave, roaring and shaking, and then the sand waves rose to the sky and fell like a torrential rain. The blue-eyed white dragon turned around in a daze. A pit nearly 20 meters wide was formed in the sand, and the quicksand rolled down. Shumo was lying in the middle with his brain full of blood, and Thanos stood aside. Roar! The eyes of the blue-eyed white dragon that the owner had been knocked down turned into red light, thunderous, and slammed his claws violently, tearing the air and making a sharp scream. Thanos raised his head to face the twinkling and sharp claws, without changing the color, and said plainly, "The Protector is very loyal and loyal." He stretched out his hand like lightning to greet him. Boom! The ground was thundered and deafening. The huge chilling paw and Thanos' palm rang muffled. Thanos is bigger than ordinary people, but compared with the blue-eyed white dragon, it is only half a palm. Even so, his palm is like a sky barrier and cannot be pressed down by a single cent. Then Thanos grabbed a claw finger, gave a light drink, arched his muscles and waved hard. The blue-eyed white dragon found himself swinging along with it, and then it rotated like a circle. Boom! The blue-eyed white dragon was directly thrown out by Thanos and fell behind him. Then he smashed through the hills in the distance, and plunged into the mountain and was buried deep in the rocky gravel, making the sound of the dragon. Just when Thanos sneered and couldn't help himself, there was a crackling sound of energy behind him. With a backhand block, 3 dazzling white wave balls hit his hand. Seeing Shumo, whose wound on his head healed quickly, Shunpo flashed again and again. Just as his forefoot left, the explosion from the sky seemed to be burning up. The powerful force carried the airflow, and the majestic energy exploded. The air wave lifted Shumo away, hurriedly stabilized his figure, and stepped on the air. When the dust fell, Thanos' face was ugly, his left hand drooping slightly, and a huge wound on it was dripping with blood, dripping on the yellow sand. "Boy, you angered me," Thanos said with a grinning smile on his livid face. As soon as the voice fell, the long red light in his eyes suddenly burst into the sky. Heat ray filled with extremely high temperatures and shot towards Shumo. "I'm Thanos." Thanos is an eternal family born on the Titans of Saturn's moon. Knowing all the philosophies of Superman of the eternal race gives him unsurpassed strength, endurance, resilience and agility. His skin is almost indestructible, especially when it comes to fighting cold, heat, electricity, radiation, poison, aging, and disease. At the same time, Thanos can also gather waves of mana energy or release plasma energy or universe energy through both eyes and hands. It is this power that makes him the overlord of one party. Shumo's eyes would send heat ray before he was shocked, and quickly threw 3 white balls to resist. At the same time, I know that besides defense, the two sides have great differences in strength, speed, and energy, and the cards in their hands are not enough. Immediately thinking about it, he yelled anxiously, "System, all draws, hurry." The fan value in the system interface consumes 6 million points and is instantly cleared. It was originally used as a deposit, but I didn't expect it to be used. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a full set of ninjutsu and physique from 3rd Hokage, Time Machine Fragment X1, Sonic Skill, Wind Blade Foot, Hatake Kakashi Skill, 3 Tomo Sharingan. All useful equipment. Shumo didn't have time to look at the system interface, because at this time the red light beam pierced the white light ball and shot at him like a bamboo. His skin has even felt the extreme heat, and there is no doubt that if he is hit, he will immediately lose his combat effectiveness. There are limits to the regeneration of vaccine people. Body flicker technique. Shunpo. Subconsciously stepping on the streamer, the speed that the naked eye can't catch flashes in the air again and again, leaving only an afterimage. Call out. Heat ray suddenly penetrated the afterimage and flew towards the outer ring. Shumo, who flew to the other side at high speed, had a chill in his right eye. In the blink of an eye, his eyes became red, and 3 gouaches were formed in it, and the unspeakable sense of obscurity emerged spontaneously. Even though these skills are powerful, I still don't look at them. Shumo's brain quickly rotated, scanning the skill bar, and suddenly found that a skill is just right for the moment. At this moment, Thanos shot up like a cannonball, and the powerful airflow began to rotate away, and the sand beneath his feet collapsed into a pothole. "Boy!" The big fist of the casserole slammed his head and covered his face fiercely from one side. The speed was so fast that Shumo could only cross his hands in front of him. Boom! Suddenly Shumo was swept into the sand with violent force like a falling meteor. The sand layer rose like a wave, and the quicksand fluttered all over the sky. A bottomless crack came out directly, spreading for hundreds of meters, and the Earth's crust began to shake. Ended. Thanos slowly fell, condescendingly looking down at the bottomless crack below. His left hand was already movable, and his strong resilience would not be long before he was intact. This terrestrial person is one of the few creatures that force him to emit heat ray and do everything possible. Thanos has never discovered that a terrestrial person can hurt him. It's incredible. Thinking of this, Thanos looked at the Earth. How mysterious is this azure planet? A trace of solemnity flashed in his eyes. "Hey, I said that I would be slapped in the face so early." Suddenly, a shocking weather erupted in the dark cracks like an abyss. Thanos suddenly turned his head, and a deep chill appeared in his back. Like a violent beast, he placed his paws on his neck and slipped at any time, and Thanos stared down. I saw Shumo slowly rising from the crack, his face becoming more and more ferocious, and his right eye was shining bright red. In the next moment, with a hiss sound, the coat broke directly, the muscles all over his body violently, and his arms had 2 bumps. It looked very scary, and he stepped into the ranks of beast from a bodybuilder. A violent aura reached the clouds. It was originally the yellow sand all over the sky, and now it was rare to roll up the billowing clouds, and a heavy, depressive aura enveloped this area. Enter Ashura mode to be violent, and be awake for 3 minutes. If you exceed it, you will be completely out of control. Passive skills are doubled collectively. Sensitivity is LV6, Strange Power is LV4, and Toughness is LV8. Active skills increase in varying degrees. The mechanized voice of the system became a little high, and reminders came into Shumo's mind. At this time there is only one word in Shumo's mind: dry. Shumo looked at the star-like right eye, and the 3 jade in the left eye rotated clockwise and connected together, forming a boomerang-like inner hook. 3 Tomo Sharingan evolved into Mangekyo Sharingan, activated skill, Kamui. Shumo stood in the air, licked his dry lips, stared at Thanos with a surprised expression, and shouted, Shadow Clone Technique. Shumo stood in the air, licked his dry lips, stared at Thanos with a surprised expression, and shouted, Shadow Clone Technique. Bang, 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 bang. 5 white smoke rose, 5 Shumo rushed out of it, Shunpo flashed again and again, standing in 5 directions and shouted. Water style, earth style, wind style, fire style, lightning style, 5 escapes, Dalian playing technique. Explosive flames burned, thunder roaring, rock and mud tumbling, floods and squally raging horns all poured down towards Thanos in the middle. When Thanos saw this, he acted, Bakudo number 61. 6 rod light prison, Shumo shouted, and 6 shining golden lights were inserted into Thanos' waist at the same time, making him immobile for a while. Rumble. A stream of elements composed of 6 energies slammed on Thanos, who was blocked from action in the blink of an eye, and the energy suddenly burst into the sand, forming an inverted cover, constantly invading the inner space. The ground is sinking continuously, forming potholes as wide as 50 meters and spreading countless cracks. The beast-like surface finally stopped shaking, more than twice as powerful as 3rd generation's Dalian Dan technique. The yellow sand had already blown away, exposing the dry surface, and the entire sand was disintegrated. However, it was not over yet. Taking advantage of the momentum to pursue, Shumo immediately rushed in, doubling the speed, and layers of sonic booms left behind him. At this time, Thanos was a bit scarred, caught off guard, and failed to break free in time and ate this set of Dalian bombs abruptly. Whoosh. Diaresis. Shunpo. Quote. Leaf strong whirlwind. Wind blade foot. Suddenly, Shumo kicked his big chin and kicked from the bottom to the top of Thanos's big chin. In the slow motion, Thanos was shocked that Shumo's speed became so fast. The big chin was kicked directly, and it was lifted up as if he had undergone a flattening operation. A dozen teeth splashed out, his neck suddenly rose, and the huge impact made Thanos lifted. Thanos only felt that he was in a trance like a bow and arrow flying out of the string, and the avatar in this position shouted forward with his palms in both hands. 73 of Hado, Shuanglian Kangwo Falls. Then the 4 clones also followed. Explosive flames spurted out from all directions, Honuo Jiao, and the scorching high temperature made the air extremely dry, instantly engulfing Thanos. Perhaps Thanos's body is somewhat resistant to heat, but what Hado uses is that the soul is burned by the soul, and the pain is incomparably penetrated into the body. What? Boy, I'm going to kill you. Thanos burst into red light all over his body, powerful energy waves dissipated the flames, his eyes were red, and the situation seemed to fall to the top. This is absolutely not allowed. He is Thanos, the strongest overlord. Die. Pushing forward with both hands, countless ions began to riot like a bird returning to the forest, gathering together, making fists with both hands, with a red halo shining on the fists, and slammed out suddenly. The 2 big red light energy waves emerge from the hands, merge and merge like a bridge across the sky and the earth. Shumo didn't change his face when he saw this, just glared, and said flatly, Kamui. Kamui. As soon as the voice fell, invisible waves surged out, and a black spot suddenly appeared in front of Shumo, and the surrounding space began to distort, like a small black hole. A huge swallowing force spreads in all directions, and the red light energy wave lost straight and was affected by the swallowing force and deviated from the orbit, slowly spiraling into the black hole. Buzzing. The menacing red pillar was still rubbing the air the moment before, and the next moment it slowly sank in as if moths were throwing into the fire. From a distance, a red stick was swallowed by a dark hole. Space ability. Thanos' eyes widened and he exclaimed. Space ability is extremely rare in the universe. What he misses day and night is the space gem. Is this human being used to land on Titan? Shumo narrowed his eyes and muttered in his heart, fortunately, Kamui has also been strengthened. Kamui's weakness is due to its slower speed when absorbing objects. It is completely impossible for him to use it to target Thanos to twist it, but such a straight external radiation is naturally fine after violent reinforcement. Shumo did not make Thanos stunned for a while. The air on his feet disappeared again and again, and the 5 clones drank softly, Earth style. Yellow Spring Marsh. Earth style. Earth flows in a big river. Bakudo number 26. Bent light. 61 of Bakudo. 6 rods light prison. Flame bomb. Suddenly the ground around Thanos softened into mud and flooded, and the mud under his feet turned into a night body to form a huge swamp, and the strong suction dragged him down. 6 golden light flakes reached his waist, and suddenly several burning fire meteors appeared in the sky, and they smashed down from the top of Thanos's head while rubbing the burning air. Drink. Thanos has a hideous face, blue veins burst out, and his eyes are scarlet. The huge energy flow rushes through his body, smashing the mud flow, pushing his hands forward, and the crimson protective cover is covering his head. Rumble. The burning rocks bombarded the energy shield, like water waves rippling. The superkinetic energy hit the shield and began to sink, shaking up layers of smoke. Light wave ball. 3 blue balls with big shining and dazzling white balls burst through the smoke and hit the protective cover one by one. Boom. The loud sound of the rock breaking the sky, the vastness of the thunder, the explosion of fire light soaring into the sky, the majestic energy invaded the protective cover, the click sound. The next moment it engulfed Thanos, the air wave washed everything around. For a time, the earth is shaking and the mountains are shaking. A deep pit nearly 100 meters wide was blown out. In the heavy black smoke, Thanos, in the center of the pit, crossed his hands and protected his head, panting and standing on the spot, his whole body covered with flesh and blood. However, all of this is not over yet. Shumo's Ashura mode is sober, and after only 3 minutes, he falls into an unconscious state. At that time, Thanos can completely kill Shumo by flying a kite. The next moment, a light flashed in the black smoke, and Thanos held his breath, and a dreamlike fascinating light came out around him. This is Bakudo bent light's use of light distortion to obscure objects. A hand reached out like lightning and patted behind Thanos. I want to repeat the same trick. Thanos quickly turned back and grabbed the protruding hand, clasped his 5 fingers tightly, and then pulled and threw Shumo severely to the ground. How could Thanos, who had been beaten twice, miss the opportunity and stepped on it suddenly, and the poof turned into white smoke, but a stone was kicked and exploded. Body replacement technique. Shumo appeared in the open space of the 2-step sway, his toes hit the ground, and Shunpo jumped across the space in an instant, like a slash of an axe. Wind blade foot. Konoha Gale. Thanos raised his hand to block this heavy offensive. He wanted to catch it backhand but rushed to the air. After 3 consecutive kicks, he had to block one by one. Thanos raised his hand to block this heavy offensive. He wanted to catch it backhand but rushed to the air. After 3 consecutive kicks, he had to block one by one. The corner of Thanos's mouth raised a sneer, and Shumo, who kicked his feet, felt a huge force spread through his body, and his whole body was shocked into the air. Lynx's foot power points were constructed frantically, Shumo gliding in the air like a flat ground, looking at Thanos with iron. After the Ashura mode was passively doubled, he was still at a disadvantage in power at level 4 strange power. But it doesn't matter, as long as it doesn't make a difference before. Bang! Shumo disappeared in place, launching a thunderous attack on Thanos. Wind was blowing under his feet, and afterimages were left behind. In addition to being called Dr. Ninjutsu, Third Hokage knows most of the physical arts, but because of his age, he did not learn 8 inner gates. Otherwise Shumo will be faster. Now after the rage, his strength is slightly weaker, but he regenerates faster than Thanos. Other than that, the speed and defense of the two are almost the same. As the overlord of one party, Thanos' knowledge swallowed all the Eternal Clan and learned superb fighting skills from an early age. Every blow of the 2 men in close combat was majestic and agile, and they could make a sonic boom with one punch and kick. The hard ground became fragile like tofu, with pits everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. During the extremely fast moving, the sky exploded frequently, and layers of burst clouds shattered. With a deafening sound of muffled thunder, Thanos only heard the sound of howling and breaking through the air, and suffered a heavy blow to his back. The severe pain spread to the bones of the whole body from the hit point, and the next moment it flew out like a cannonball. Just like Shumo before, he fluttered and rolled on the surface. When he stabilized his figure and looked up, there was still Shumo standing next to Shumo. Clone. But I didn't see it rushing over before, it was just remote interference and damage. Shumo smiled. Look around. Then Thanos suddenly came over, and the four directions connected to rise up purple-red sky-like square pillars to cover this space of heaven and earth. Four red yang formation. Thanos, you are done. Shumo smiled and smiled very happily. Don't be too lucky to meet Thanos who has no gems. If he brought the psychic scepter, he would kneel before 3 moves. There is no one in the skill bar that can defend against the psychic storm. The speed of the two is almost the same, as long as they touch lightly, they can directly play GG. Of course, if Thanos wears a psychic scepter, Shumo won't fight at all, and ran away in a rage. Thanos cared about Odin and Sorcerer Supreme and would not choose to chase. Multiple shadow clone. Bang, bang, bang. The enchantment was instantly full of Shumo clones, and the heads were moving. At the same time, he looked at Thanos kindly, and shouted, "What the hell, Thanos?" Shumo waved his hand, and countless clones rushed down immediately, and Thanos was directly overwhelmed by the sky and sun. The physical strength is exhausting so fast, there is no more energy to develop Kido and ninjutsu. Shumo listened, and Thanos was a little bit sorrowful for a moment when Jun Yangu's frightened sound came into his ears. Reunion doesn't seem to be filmed anymore. Let's go straight to the finale. But the next moment he slapped his face, boom. The mountain burst and the ground broke, and when he turned his head, his face suddenly became dark. 4 red yang formation collapsed directly. Om. The sky was agitated, and a little bit of light was condensed, as several stars pierced the sky and bombarded the 4 red yang formation at an unclear speed. Rumble. The horrible explosions swept across the 4 places, the gust of wind whistled and carried the shock wave to blow everything away, the dazzling skyrocketing mushroom cloud rose from the ground, and the cloud collapsed. In the distance, Thanos pointed to the 4th gate muzzle on the warship that Thanos was sitting on, and blue particles flowed around. Inside the ship, a commander, Chitauri, who was wearing a helmet and armor with a horny head, issued an order to the ship's intelligence system, "Quickly search and aim at that human." He looked at the billowing black smoke in the distance, and the owner Thanos took the small warship back home to visit relatives, but actually came to test the attitude of the Lord of the 9 Realms. Maybe Odin was sleeping, maybe he didn't care about Titans, or maybe he didn't want to cause any conflicts, so Asgard didn't take any action until just now. But things were 3-0, absolutely unexpected. A human appeared, and the entire battle could be seen through remote monitoring. The commander's body was cold and his limbs trembled. No matter how he thought his master was at a disadvantage, it seemed that there was no way to be surrounded by Europe. Then he fired a star-level high-energy particle cannon, destroying the barrier like several nuclear bombs, and flew the warship over. In the billowing smoke, the sand on the surface has turned into crystals, and the surface has turned into lava as scorching hot. Shumo was rushed into the ground in an embarrassing manner, and blood dripped from his forehead with a bewildered expression. "Thanos, you are actually calling someone." Before stepping in the air, several stars hit the barrier and exploded so violently that it was devastated and disintegrated. Shumo was blown up completely unexpectedly. Fortunately, he was not in the core area, and the powerful shock wave knocked him to the ground, but not far away was Thanos lying undead. At this time, his blue-gold battle armor had long been cloth strips, and his whole body was blood, not a piece of it was not a wound. The avatars of the vast ocean were all washed away by the wind and turned into white smoke after a painful meal. Thanos Willie stood up, heard the words, grinned openly at the corner of his mouth and said, "I'm afraid the power that suddenly exploded has already reached its limit. You must know that at the beginning, the power and speed of this earthling were not enough. Without the help of treasures, he could only be equalized by stimulating his potential." When Shumo was about to choke back, he thought of the system prompt in his mind. "Host, there are 50 seconds left, please turn off the Ashura mode, otherwise you will enter an unconscious state after the time expires." Not far, Shumo also stood up and looked at Thanos, without changing his face, and said forcefully, "I said, don't say it too early. I was panicking a group. If I turn off the violent mode now, ninjutsu, Kido and passive skills will be restored to their original state. Once the Dalian technique returns to its original power, it is only a little pain for Thanos, and it is not a concern. Shumo will lose the capital to fight Thanos." Buzzing. The powerful turbine stirred the wind pressure, and the huge warship flew slowly to cover the sky and the sun, and the muzzle above was aimed at Shumo. Now what? Thanos spread his hands madly, and Shumo's face was a little painful under the pressure of the violent wind. Still the same. It's really clever, boy, I like you very much, be my subordinate, and share with me the darkness of the entire universe. Thanos did not become irritated by this, but showed appreciative eyes. The strength of this human being is completely incomparable with the Heiyawu under his men. For a while, he aroused his desire to solicit. Hey, it's interesting, you are not afraid that I will go around preaching that the Overlord has stumbled under my hands, or will I use the annihilation cannon to get through the siege? Shumo moved forward slowly, smiling cheerfully, as if he was a little moved by this proposal. The Overlord aura is not what you can imagine, boy, what's your name? When Thanos saw this, he laughed and put on a very haughty expression, and then asked. Call me, Kakarot will do. Shumo walked up to Thanos, stared at Thanos and looked at each other. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became tense, and then stretched out his hand to make a handshake. Shumo walked up to Thanos, stared at Thanos and looked at each other. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became tense, and then stretched out his hand to make a handshake. Thanos's eyes shone brightly, and then he raised his hand. Host, 20 seconds, 19 seconds. The two hands gradually approached, and just as they shook hands, Shumo suddenly patted forward, and Thanos was not surprised but showed such an expression as expected. Snapped. Shumo's slap was caught with one hand, and the other hand clasped the attacking fist. Thanos grinned. The strong do not need to surrender. I can see that you and I are the same kind of people. But it's over. Thanos grasped firmly with both hands, and the spaceship above his head dropped a blue light, and the two began to levitate and fly slowly. At the same time, a small muzzle condensed a wave of particle wave cyclones, aimed at Shumo. It's over. It seems that your eyes are not so good. Shumo didn't panic, instead he smiled and satirized. Varied. As soon as Thanos heard it, he could feel something crawling into his nose, and then. Sorry, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done this. I actually killed so many people, I'm a beast. Thanos immediately let go of his hands, tears in his eyes like a fountain poured down, crying and running back to apologize. 9 seconds. Shumo ignores the system's prompts, and now Thanos has the black technology of Doraemon. The apology bug can be said to be a fish that can be slaughtered. However, I'm going to kill you. Sorry, I actually said that. Thanos roared with a sullen face, and the next sentence shed tears, but Shumo was horrified that he didn't bow to apologize. The special black technology has failed. Shumo's face changed drastically, and he jumped out hurriedly. Shunpo plus instant body technique flashed in the air frequently. Thanos immediately jumped out of the anti-gravity halo and roared, "How dare you humiliate me like this? I was wrong, and I was swearing. My heart is so painful." A look of guilt appeared on his face after the roaring shout, and he said affectionately, "Don't go, please accept my apology." Ah, Kakarot. Shumo tried his best to run through the air. How could the black technology fail? No, it was half done. Thanos is now physically autonomous, and his mouth and face are firm. 5 seconds. Blue-eyed white dragon. Shumo yelled to the ground with a hung sound. The blue-eyed white dragon spread its wings and burst out of the mountain. The blood on his hand kept flowing. It was broken when Thanos threw it out. 4 seconds. Exit Ashura mode. Shumo immediately jumped onto the blue-eyed white dragon and screamed. The next moment his whole body was drowning. It was too painful to fill his whole body with unprecedented fatigue. Ashura mode has been exited. All skills have been restored to their original state. Sharingan has stimulated advancement to remain in Mangekyo, and the cooldown of Ashura mode is 1 week. Kill him. Thanos lost the first hand, and after a bitter battle, he had no spare capacity to catch up, so he directly ordered the warship to launch the largest particle cannon. Then he looked nervous and apologized. "How can you kill? You can't do this, I want to apologize." Quote question mark quote. Commander Black question mark face. Chapter 81. Hurry up. Do you want to go against my will? Thanos was furious, not knowing what was wrong with him, only felt something got in his nose, and then started to say some inexplicable things. Apologize. My fault. My heart hurts. I am Thanos. How could I be wrong? how could I apologize? I have a clear conscience in everything I did, how could my heart hurt? After Thanos roared frantically, the commander pressed the button timidly. No, how can you do this? It's all my fault, you actually killed someone. Woohoo. At the next moment, Thanos's tears rolled, perhaps because of the emotional fluctuations, he was crying and chasing him wildly. Quote. The commander was completely at a loss and just wanted to ask what he was doing, but couldn't say it, so he pressed the launch button and squatted on the ground and circled. It was the first time he saw Thanos cry, and it was really touching. Call out. A starlight flashed in the sky, pointing straight to Shumo ahead. The blue-eyed Balong was about to turn his head and counterattack with a bursting blast bomb, but was interrupted by Shumo. Blue-eyed white dragon, don't turn your head, fly in that direction, any door is there. Shumo pointed to a direction, where any door was there, and then turned around on the dragon's back and quietly looked at the extremely fast annihilation cannon. This kind of particle cannon can be counted as a nuclear bomb. The blasting blast bomb of the blue-eyed white dragon cannot be countered and it has to be stopped. His white ball is also not good, it can only be so. Kamui. All skills retreated to the original due to the end of the rage, but Sharingan evolved due to stimulation and stayed in Mangekyo. Shumo's left eye revolved at a high speed. As the invisible wave swayed out, the corners of his mouth and eye sockets began to bleed. After his energy was completely exhausted, he forced to use Kamui, and his whole body was in pain. Shumo gritted his teeth, his left eye glared with all his strength, and black spots appeared in the space and the power of swallowing slowly spread. Call out. However, the particle cannon is really huge. When it lost, the black dots grew a little bit. After it rushed in a straight line, it was slowly attracted, but it took a concave shape to break through the black dot attraction. However, after it came out, the figure became smaller, and part of the energy was slipped into Kamui. But Shumo's purpose of delay was achieved. Whoosh! The huge wings of the blue-eyed white dragon passed by the azure particle cannon. The particle cannon is not a tracking bomb. His high-energy attack means fast. Kamui's attraction and swallowing slowed his speed and gave the blue-eyed white dragon a chance to escape. The dust was flying, the blue-eyed white dragon flapped its wings and turned straight down and landed on the ground. Shumo was in pain all over, turned over and jumped down. A staggering and powerful acupuncture sensation came up from the soles of the feet, and could not help but leaned against the blue-eyed white dragon's feet. Hey loudly. Seeing this, Qingyan Beilong lowered his head and made a soft whimper, which was a little strange. Shumo clenched his dry lips, and took 2 steps to prop up his body. There was an arbitrary door in front of him, and the bedroom inside was swept by yellow sand. Shumo lifted his heavy limbs and moved forward slowly. When one foot was about to step in, the warship flew up at great speed not far away, aiming at the blue-eyed white dragon. This is a space portal. Does he have space gems on him? On the battleship, Thanos was standing on the console with tears in his eyes. As for the commander Chitauri who saw his ugly appearance, his neck was broken. Who told him to see things that shouldn't be seen? He clearly saw that the space door in front of Shumo was completely different from the surrounding environment. Can't let go. I have done so many wrong things, and I can no longer kill. I want to apologize for the past. When he reached his mouth, it suddenly changed. Thanos' eyes cracked, and his whole body began to tremble, and his hands trembled and finally pressed the launch button. No, I want to redeem my sin. Why do you commit it even if you know it is wrong? No, I want to redeem my sin. Why do you commit it even if you know it is wrong? Get me out of my body. Thanos is like schizophrenia, with a word, kill, on the left and wrong, on the right. Finally, Thanos remembered that something got in his nose, and it should be solved as long as he finds it. But how to find it? They all got in. Deduct it. Thanos didn't have time to think about it. He just wanted to catch Shumo. After firing the particle cannon, the beam fell like a meteor, and the mushroom cloud rose from the ground again. After the dust cleared, there was lava besides the pit. Disappeared. One step too late. Thanos was stunned for a while. He suddenly realized that the battle seemed to be lost. Thanos lost. It's great, it's okay. He was extremely disgusted by the words in his mouth, and he patted his face without saying anything. Snapped. The crisp and resounding slap echoed in the warship, but fortunately he was alone. A small bug was photographed and Thanos saw it, but the bug was so smart that it slipped into the other nostril as soon as it got out of the hole. I hurt so many people, I need to apologize one by one. Snapped. With another slap, the little bug slapped its head and retracted back. The fingers that were already ready to crush it pinched an empty space. 2 red stamps were left on Thanos's face. At this time, the central space of the explosion was opened again, and only a seam appeared. Shumo's hand came out, his fingers pierced. Middle finger. This scene was completely transmitted to the ultra-clear screen on the console, and Thanos's pupils shrank suddenly, and he roared hysterically. Kakarot, I'm going to kill you. You can't kill, the more you kill, the more sins you have. You should come to your door to apologize and admit your mistakes. Shut up. Bang bang bang. There was a series of applause from the ship, which was endless. So tired. Shumo closed any door and put it away. The bedroom was full of yellow sand floating over there, sitting on the sandy ground, weakly. His eyes became more and more blurred, drowsiness enveloped his brain, his eyes closed gradually, and darkness fell. Shumo, why does your room keep banging? Is there something wrong? What? Alice, you said Shumo fainted. Then the faint voice of Yorona opening the door came into her ears, and she couldn't hear her behind. Shumo fell into a coma. Asgard. Heimdall, who was monitoring the movement of the 9 realms, had a dazzling golden light in his eyes and looked down at the stars. After a while, a thick look of horror appeared on his face without fear. Heimdall quickly turned his head and ran towards the king's palace in the center. Along the way, he ran into the second prince Loki, nodded and left without slowing down. Loki was left with a puzzled look, looking at the rainbow bridge, a glint flashed in his eyes. Shumo, wake up. Is the stomach too hungry and fainted? Nonsense, thought it was you, where did the sand in the bedroom come from? Maybe it's tired of digging out the sand. Quote. Shumo was lying in the bedroom, the sand had been cleaned up, and his consciousness gradually became clear. When he slowly opened his eyes, he saw Lorna's face full of care. Shumo straightened up, stroked his forehead, and asked, how long have I slept? The Ashura mode is very effective, but it can also cause great damage to the body. In addition to the pain all over the body, there is also extreme fatigue. In comparison, it was a bargain for him to almost kill Thanos before the beginning of the story by relying on the Ashura mode. Shumo is also the man who almost made the finale, or as he crowned the emperor-like guy, Mo Emperor. 2 full days. Lorna finally let go of her throat, wondering, what happened? That's right, Lorna and I have to run outside to eat, so tired to say. Gaily nodded frequently, holding her cheeks in her face, and then spoke. Snapped. You foodie. Shumo slapped Giali's bamboo rat on the head angrily, and looked at the plump little face. He ate so well, or else he go to save the world, it's too bitter to say it. He raised his head at an angle of 45 degrees, and his face showed a sense of sang mulberry, thinking about how he almost made the finale of the reunion, and remembering the current Thanos again. The apology bug will penetrate into the target's nose, but will not go directly into the body. If you want to solve it, it is easy to handle. Sprinkle some pepper on it, and sneezes out. However, what Shumo didn't know was that Thanos was a fan of the authorities. He always felt that he ran into his head and slapped the bugs out. This method is extremely poor. The points of action are on the face, and the nose is like a plaster. The impact on the insects is not strong enough. If the bystander, Commander Kateri, is still alive, it will be resolved soon. Lorna flipped through Byakugan, curled her lips and said annoyed, Cut, don't say it, don't say it. After speaking, seeing Shumo was fine, and Alice also said that it was caused by fatigue, so she went out of the bedroom. As soon as I walked to the door, I suddenly remembered and turned his head and said, Andy came this morning and found that you were unconscious and sitting in a coma, so he would take the manuscript and go to the company. But after you sent the plan email last time, you were in a coma. He said that it should be issued in the same way as before. When Shumo heard it, he hurriedly used Lorna's phone to make a call. His phone was broken into pieces on Titan. Doo-doo. Uncle Andy is me, have you started printing? Don't print and wait for me to go over. Yes, I want to change most of the plans, and the previous plans will be invalidated. After Shumo returned the phone to Lorna, he was about to go out. Lorna opened her mouth worriedly. Why is she so anxious? Her body is just right. That's what I said, but I still help Shumo to fasten his clothes button. Time waits for no one, I'm out of the house. Shumo went to the study first, and T800 was still working hard for 24 hours. After switching his manuscript to another comic book, Shumo went out. Lorna looked at Shumo's back, feeling a little sweet in her heart, like a good wife and mother sending her husband out. Golly, in Dasha's scenery pulled her clothes, with a dying expression. Lorna, I'm going to starve to death. This food. Lorna pursed her lips and sighed depressedly. Marvel Comics. Little brother Jinmu, this production is a bit difficult. Come and teach me. I will treat you to dinner. Natasha was still fascinating Jinmu, pulling down her red hair, her voice was terribly loud. The employee on the side bowed, his legs a little unnatural. In the face of such seduction, Jinmu sat in a precarious manner, without squinting his eyes, and said in Tai Chi, no need to please, I will teach you later. The face was calm, and his heart was secretly angrily said, when I dress so openly, I have suffered a loss in Lishi, so how can I be fooled? Jinmu studied in the manga as a one-year student of Chinese liberal arts at Shengjing University. He is a veritable academic master. Although it is difficult to transfer to the animation production industry about mathematics, he quickly adapts. In the end, Jinmu used remote operation to teach. Even if Natasha kept moving up, Jinmuyan looked like a Buddha. After tossing for a long time, Natasha returned without success again, sitting back in her original position and looking like a MMP. No one can escape her charm after sitting. Jinmuyan can be said to have broken her for the first time. I saw the boss, an employee said as soon as he entered the office area. It's been a long time since I saw the boss. I almost didn't recognize it. The boss is a cartoonist. He throws his hand at the shopkeeper, and the manuscripts are all taken by manager Andy. The old employee drank his coffee and replied. He went to manager Andy, and it seems that the company is about to change. Natasha's eyes flashed, and she secretly said, change, could it be any clues? It has been a few days without any clues to put her agent's face on. Well, why do you say that the boss has changed as soon as she came? She asked the old employee who approached her with a flattering attitude. The coder on the side was agitated. When the goddess asked, they weren't Jinmu and quickly answered them one by one. Jinmu crackled on the keyboard, his ears cocked, shook his head, and went back to work. The company has no secrets at all, and even if Natasha asks Andy, it's no use. He just had a deal with Natasha, a SHIELD agent, and experienced a peaceful life by the way. Manager's office. Shumo, what did you say? At this time, the atmosphere in the room was a bit tense, and Andy got up in surprise and shouted. Is it too early to publish? Although we are already a golden sign, once no one buys a single book, it will be a huge loss. That's right, Shumo came out this time as a pamphlet. The single-line book is a book that reprints the content from the serialized publication after the same work is serialized, and becomes an independent book with one work as the theme. Generally, the single book of comics is assembled from 7 to 8 times. Qian Wang is good, but what Shumo needs is not such a collection-type booklet, but a new serialization method. No, I don't just want to publish a single book, I also want to completely pull Ghoul and Giant out of it. Shumo was expressionless and Kaido. It was Thanos who made this change. Thanos was beaten up by him now, and he will definitely speed up the pace of collecting infinite gems in the future. Correspondingly, his pace will speed up. The release of comic magazines is crowded, and so many comics cannot wait for the completion of the previous comics before they are serialized. It's too slow. When Andy heard the words, he stared at Shumo in a daze for a while and asked, pull it out, do you think? Let the boy jump and the soulmate Mank become a short-term display platform. The comics with more than 15 words will be published in a single book, and then the corresponding comics on the jump will stop and replace the follow-up comics. Shumo, this is dangerous, no one has ever done this. Andy suddenly roared in shock. Bang! There was a clap of tables in the office, and the employees outside looked at each other, and Natasha looked inexplicable. Naughty. It's just a joke. Do you know that this will ruin the benchmark of the boy jump that has been hard to build? Andy slapped the table fiercely and shouted, flushing. Manga magazines were used as a short-term display platform, and then only single-page books were published, which has never been done in the comics industry. The one-line book is simply reprinted and then put on sale. It only serves as a collection effect for fans who have read the magazine before. For people who haven't read a magazine and want to read but don't want to read other comics, the booklet is a way for them to save money. A whole comic book is definitely something you want to start with. On the contrary, only the comics that are popular in the magazine will choose to make a single book, otherwise no one will buy it and die. The release of the pamphlet does not conflict with the magazine, and the comics are still serialized on it, but Andy heard Shumo's meaning like a flowing factory, and he published the pamphlet after all the words were reached. This is simply too expensive to sell the company. Uncle Andy, I know what I'm doing, and I know exactly what the future of the company is, so I hope you can help me. Shumo didn't say why he did it. Andy is just an ordinary person who said would believe this. Say the end is coming, so the manga should be faster. The end is here, what's the matter with comics, shouldn't you run away first? So Shumo does not intend to explain, nor does he want to explain. Andy came up, stared at Shumo and asked, are you serious? Certainly, Shumo answered decisively. I don't know why you overturned the previous plan, but since I know what I'm doing, I can't refuse the boss's intention. When Andy saw Shumo's determined eyes, he knew that he couldn't persuade him. He didn't have any company shares and was just a manager. Shumo could leave him aside. After a moment of silence, Andy opened his mouth and said, in this way, it is too few to publish a single-page serialization of 15 episodes. I will use 30 episodes as the last issue of the magazine, and then it will become an independent comic. Shumo heard this, with a smile on his face, and said with a smile, yes, Uncle Andy, as long as you can understand. 30 episodes are almost the same. By this number of episodes, most comics are on the right track. In fact, the independent pamphlet serialization has often been the case in previous lives in Europe and the United States, but it is only a 1-year or 6-monthly one. Ajab, I don't understand what I don't understand. In fact, no one in modern times does this, but modern comics have it, and that is, Captain America. At first, it was serialized in the newspaper, USA Today, and later a comic book was published as a serialization method. When Andy said this, his face was sad, he paused, and then said, then the circulation of the U.S. Today newspaper has been reduced. I am worried that the issue of the pamphlet will not be good, and the magazine will fail even more. It's really over then. Andy stared at Shumo, wanting to give some last advice. Shumo smiled at this and hugged Uncle Andy, and said firmly, no, I have a way to solve these difficulties. In this case, tell me what to do next. Andy took 2 steps to get back to the original position. Suddenly, he reacted and asked anxiously, you have to come over so many comics. I knew you passed out in the morning. I don't agree, the pace is so fast, you don't protect your body at all, and you can't make your dead parents feel heartache. Moreover, all these books are your signature, which will attract some people's attention, and they will think that the company is looking for someone to paint. Moreover, all these books are your signature, which will attract some people's attention, and they will think that the company is looking for someone to paint. Shumo raised his eyebrows when he heard it, but he didn't change his mind by Andy's words. He came from the soul, and his original parents were dead and never met. This emotional card does not affect him. But the next sentence, attracting attention, reminded him of Natasha in the office area. This kind of comic release speed is indeed terrible. Normally, he will publish 1 story a week, and he will publish a single book in the next week, each with 7 to 8 words, and if not sure, it will become a weekly book. At that time, 42 stories will be added, and the magazine will be added. This is really horrible. No cartoonist can do this. Such a speed would definitely arouse the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., who is already watching him closely. However, it doesn't matter. S.H.I.E.L.D. will not dare to close the company anyway. But he suddenly discovered that this was not good for the lottery at all. Shumo leaned his forehead on the indoor sofa, closed his eyes, lost in thought. Uncle Andy, it's up to me to specify which comics are published in standalone books. Okay, Andy agreed, as long as he didn't go all out. Shumo felt that his brain was hot before and it was a bit taken for granted. The purpose of the independent serial booklet was to speed up the progress. The current lottery is a bit weird. For example, Naruto currently does not show any ninjutsu in the third generation of the comics, but he can draw a set of ninjutsu, which means that a lot of fan points are used to draw prizes in advance. If it is now serialized to the Fourth World War, then the ninjutsu of third generation may only appear in 1 million fan points, one in advance and one normal, and the consumption of fan points is too far. So the progress is quicker, and some good things are available earlier and the fan value consumed is also saved. But some comics progress quickly and it is useless. The comics of the lower world have little effect on him. The more serialized, the bigger the case. If the unique directly, the fan value will be lost and lost. So this kind of comics should just be done once a week. Shumo, did you think about it? You come in and go around. You don't know how many times you have changed your mind. Hurry up and make a decision. The printing shop is in a hurry. Andy hung up the phone, looking depressed. At the beginning, I said 15 words. The previous 30 words are now specified again, and they will change 3 times a day. Fortunately, printing has not yet started. Uncle Andy, you have persuaded me to change so many times. Shumo spread his hands and said that I was also helpless. In fact, I found that the initial idea was a little unconsidered. Sure enough, one more person walks more correctly, otherwise the final arrangement is made with 15 words, and the lottery draw will be very messy at that time. The last 2 discuss the final decision. Ghoul, Giant, and Yugong will be reduced to 1 episode a week, and Naruto, Shinigami, and One Punch will be published independently of the magazine and published serialized separate editions when the number of episodes reaches a certain number. In addition, Jump plus 2 new comics will be placed at the back, while Z and Mank will not change except for the addition of a comic. After the matter was handled well, Shumo was about to leave. Suddenly he thought, and asked Shang Andy, I remember Stark Industries as the number 1 technology and arms company, right? Ah, it seems so. Our comics industry has no contact with this industry. What's wrong with you? Ah, nothing. Since it is the number 1, it should have branches all over the world. We can try to cooperate with him. Cooperation. A cave in the Gobi Desert in Afghanistan. The sound of dang 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 sounded frequently, and a mature-looking middle-aged man with a mustache was sweating, and he kept waving his tools to beat the metal pieces. Next to him stood a half-bald white man wearing glasses, passing the pliers in his hand, and said with some anxiety, Tony, we have too little time, I am afraid they will not give us so much time. Then let's hurry up, trust me, Yinsen. Tony Stark patted the white aperture through his clothes, confidently. A month ago, Tony demonstrated Stark Industries' high-end technology, Jericho-guided missiles, in the Afghan area. On the way back, I was attacked by my own missiles. Although I was lucky not to die, there were still a lot of bullets pieces that penetrated. With the help of Yinsen, an electromagnet was used to attract the shrapnel to prevent the shrapnel from entering the heart along the blood vessels. Finally, inspired by Yinsen, Tony regained his confidence and the 2 worked together to create a small arc reactor instead of the battery. He should be thankful that there is no one called Che Guevara from the terrorists, otherwise. After a long time, they were still doing their work in an orderly manner. In fact, they secretly became a big guy who could help them out without telling the terrorists. But even though the terrorists could not understand from the surveillance, they still had doubts, and the leader Bald came in. The bald guy asked Tony to build a Jellicoe missile, hoping to conquer the world by this, but he saw Tony made it strange. The bald man walked up to Tony and said viciously, why don't you listen to me? Yinsen hurriedly stepped forward and explained, this weapon is very complicated. Shut up. The bald guy made people hold Yinsen and interrogated them with tools. What the hell is it? Yinsen was very calm, did not betray Tony, and said, he is just building the Jellicoe missile. What do you want? Tony was nervous, and immediately shouted when he saw it, I need Yinsen to help me. Do you want to give you a deadline? The bald guy let go of Yinsen and said viciously, tomorrow must be. Don't wait for tomorrow, the comics will be released tomorrow. Suddenly, a voice of inadequacy rang in the cave, and everyone present suddenly opened a transparent square door in the air. A young man pushed the door and walked out, dressed in casual clothes, looking around, as if he were traveling. Omega. A terrorist stared, his eyes wide, unable to control his exclaim. His three views were directly broken. Someone made a hole in the air and just came in like this. Tony twitched his mouth and showed a kind smile. Hey, are you sent by the military to save me? Since Tony was attacked on the way back after military personnel visited the missile, the military cannot get rid of it. Must be desperate to find. Tony Stark is serious. I'm not from the military, I'm here to talk about cooperation from afar. Shumo's face was stern, pretending to be serious. Who are you? The terrorist behind the bald man had already pointed his gun at Shumo. Although Shumo's way of playing is a bit peculiar, they are brave and brave with heavy firepower. Not at all shocked, Shumo took 2 steps forward and said calmly, I advise you to put down your guns and leave yourself some back. Turning his head to ask Tony, think about how, as long as you cooperate with me, I can take you out safely. Yinsen winked at Tony, and the armor could be put on tomorrow, but the real effect was really bad. Now there is a person to help, but the straw is finally tight. Tony heard this, and after looking at Yinsen, he said, as long as I don't violate the principle, I can promise to cooperate with you. Tony heard this, and after looking at Yinsen, he said, as long as I don't violate the principle, I can promise to cooperate with you. Tony didn't want to go out of the wolf's den and into the tiger's den. He would never do things like making missiles again. No problem at all. Shut up you guys, this is my place. The bald yelled without saying a word. This person ignored him from the beginning and talked about business seriously. This is the site of the 10 Commandments gang. He shot and greeted him without saying a word, and he was about to make Shumo pockmarked. Faced with the metal warheads, Shumo didn't want his clothes to test the strength, and directly raised his hand and said indifferently, Hado of 31. Red artillery. Thick flames gushing out from the palm of the hand, flooding the front, and all the terrorists, including the bald guy, turned to ashes in a burst of crazy screams. The metal bullets were incinerated and turned into a little silver water and dropped to the ground, with a buzzing sound. Yinsen and Tony were frightened on the spot, watching Shumo burn these terrorists to death with just one blow, turning around and walking towards them. The two unconsciously took a step back. This was not what they thought in their hearts but the instinct to fear the strong. Tony was a very proud person, and he would never allow himself to be timid, so he immediately raised his head and stood upright. Show that it was not me just now. Tony reminded. There are still many people out there. Sure enough, the next moment, there were waves of footsteps and noise outside, as well as the erection of heavy objects. T-800. Shumo clapped his hands, and a burly man wearing sunglasses walked out of any door, holding guns in both hands and heavy machinery on his back. This set of equipment is equipped with Summon T-800, but because it is used to copy comics, it has been left in the corner to eat ashes. Destroy them. Shumo pointed out the door. T-800 nodded blankly, and walked out swaggeringly. He is going to die. Yinsen couldn't help but persuade him. He would be beaten into a hornet's nest the moment he went out like this. Tony frowned, his eyes fixed on the back of T-800, feeling that this was not a human at all. His expression was too rigid, like a machine. The next moment, a continuous burst of gunfire sounded. Yinsen couldn't bear to look directly at him and turned his head. Tony poked his head out instead. His pupils shrank suddenly, and Tony was stunned by the panic. Several bullets hit T-800, but T-800 did not fall to the ground. He directly picked up his double guns and stood in place and fired wildly, killing one by one terrorists. After a period of unilateral killings, T-800 strode in and stood beside Shumo. Robot. Tony saw the end from the beginning, and said with certainty that the armor concept in his mind began to be perfected, and the power of T-800 gave him an impact on him who is still making the Iron Overlord. She turned to Shumo and asked, Who are you? I have never heard of such a robot. And how do you plan to cooperate? Shumo smiled and threw the magazine to Tony, and said cheerfully, to do our company's publicity advertisement, and let all of your employees buy the company's magazine publications. Advertising is a comic magazine that must be read after the Jedi escape. Tony Stark was speechless for a while, and Yinsen said that he would ask for more blessings. At this time, if you want to refuse, you will involuntarily think of the flames and the T-800 standing behind him with craters. Tony looked at the smiley eyes and shuddered in his heart, and said without silos. Okay, I shoot this commercial. Stark Industries Chairman, Tony Stark. Since cooperation is like cooperation, Tony kicked his shame back and stretched his hand forward. Chairman of Marvel Comics, Shumo. Shumo also shook hands twice. Tony was a little surprised, thinking it was just a joke before, but he didn't expect it to be true. Really manga. He can imagine how fantastic it is for a technology arms giant to cooperate with a comic book company. Others have celebrated April Fool's Day before. Shumo smiled without answering. The cooperation with Stark's 503 Industries just made the comics more famous. He has swallowed nearly 80% of the American comic market today, and tomorrow will be the starting point of One Punch Man network broadcast. Animation will attract some young people, but this is not enough. Uncle Andy intends to open overseas markets and sell them all over the world. Comic magazines can't be published in the United States, but they can be written in separate editions. At that time, he will print Tony on the cover, and there will be a lot of people buying the Jedi Escape advertisement, and it will even explode when Iron Man declares, "It's all money, it's all fan value." Immediately after that, the name of Marvel Company has been established all over the world, and then a series of publicity can be carried out with the back of Stark Industrial Division. The main department of Stark's industry is arms, but there are other departments, such as Energy Cleaning Department, Civil Technology Development Department and so on. This kind of industry is basically the fusion in the industry, and all walks of life must keep a hand, otherwise how to form a volume. The most typical example of Shumo's past life is the Samsung Group, who can't escape Samsung by everything he needs, food, shelter and transportation, and it has become an indispensable part of life. Stark Industries doesn't do everything, but the research industry alone has branches all over the world. The comics have been passed to 10, and the 10 passes are perfect for overseas promotion. Tony must read the howling of the comics. Who doesn't move in his heart? As long as you start with one copy, you are a potential fan. Shumo asked the two of them, "Tony, now either you are here waiting for the real rescue, or you go directly to New York with me." He knew that now that S.H.I.E.L.D. had sent people to search in the desert, Tony would be found as long as he walked out. Rescue. I didn't wait, I went straight back to New York, Yinsen, and I went to New York to live a very enjoyable life. When Tony heard how he was suffering here, he was fed up and immediately abandoned the rescue team and turned to invite Yinsen. Yinsen was his lifesaver. If he hadn't made an electromagnet, he would have died. Yinsen refused because he liked his hometown and hoped for some changes. You go outside to solve everyone, and let Yinsen go out safely. Shumo ordered T-800 to go out and clean up. Yinsen thanked him and disappeared at the entrance of the cave. Let's go back to New York. Shumo greeted him, and Tony walked through any door with joy for the rest of his life, and appeared directly in a small alley. Hey, this is the door. What principle is used? Warping phase technology. As soon as Tony walked out of any door, he discovered that he had come out of a door frame. As a science and technology tyrant, he immediately began to enter the posture of a scholar, without waiting for Shumo to answer. Continued. I don't see any exposed part structure on this, it seems to be hidden under this. Continued. I don't see any exposed part structure on this, it seems to be hidden under this. I have to say that your taste is not good. Such a technology that surpasses the world is actually painted in a lady's pink, it should be dyed in red and gold, and I really can't stand it anymore. Stop. After Shumo heard it, he was complained about the position of the finished product. This arbitrary door was originally like this and it is not easy to change it manually. Maybe some zeros are related to the color. Skynet Alice didn't know how this was made, and Tony wanted to figure out how to get the space gem first. Well, Tony is now back in New York. Outside is your hungry red light district. Shumo waved his hand to put away any door, took Tony's shoulder and half walked and half pushed out of the alley. The feasting streets appeared in front of Tony. But he didn't want to think about it, his mind was full of Shumo's arbitrary doors, and he hurriedly said, "Don't you still have a subordinate in the desert? How can you come back when the door disappears?" He also found that Shumo waved his hand and put away a door frame. It was incredible. Is it space technology again? Don't worry about that, he has other tasks to do. No, you borrow me to study for 10.5 days, and I will rent money. I am not short of money. In this way, I will shoot a few more advertisements for your company and be your company's spokesperson. Shumo directly vetoed it. What is the endorsement of comics? One advertisement is enough. You are not a comic character doing so much. Shumo didn't bother to listen to Tony's request, pushed hard on his back, and he staggered and leaned forward. Ah, who? It happened to fall on a street girl, which immediately caused the other to scream. The people around were staring at the past, very sloppy and rough, looking like they came out of a slum. Tony hurriedly apologized and blocked his face and turned around, only to find that there were no alleys as walls. He murmured in surprise, how is it possible? He obviously came out of the alley himself, but how did he disappear again in a blink of an eye? He seems to be Tony Stark. At this time, the onlookers finally recognized it, and immediately exclaimed. The next moment, the surrounding crowd rioted, all rushing towards Tony, and the one who was most excited was the street girl. She was played as a hooligan by Tony Stark, how could she not make a slap in the face? Besides, if you don't lose money, you can pay for the meat, and have a good night with Tony is also considered famous in New York. On the other hand, Tony is running around, there is no time to think about alleys and arbitrary doors. As long as he knows that this cooperation is true, he can find Shumo. In the Gobi Desert, S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military are searching day and night. The senior agent sent this time is Hawkeye as the leader. As they searched the next area, they were told that Tony Stark had returned to New York. Is he kidding? We almost rummaged through the desert. Hawkeye exasperated. On the opposite side of the communication was Collison, who hesitated and said, it was found in the red light district, but it looks very embarrassed, and there was a hole in the mouth. Hawkeye became irritated and sarcastically said, maybe rich people are experiencing life. He was exhausted looking for people, but he didn't expect people to go straight back and play around. Some people say he is playing a hooligan and demanding compensation. Marvel Comics is in a newly built independent studio. Tony Stark fled from the cave mold with a panic on his face. When he was picked up by the military, he took out a comic magazine from his arms. With a face full of vicissitudes of joy, he wept and said, Juvenile Jump gave me the motivation to survive, inspired me to dedicate to freedom, and made me understand that Marvel Comics are the must-see comics in life. Cut. The ad director on the side hurriedly clapped his hands and announced the end of the filming. When Tony heard this, he quickly threw the magazine back into the hands of Assistant Pepper, walked to the front of Shumo, who had been watching for a long time, and scolded. What kind of messy lines are these? This is the most stupid advertisement I have ever seen. It's a pity that you played this idiot advertisement yourself. Shumo spread his hands on this, saying that you can watch it yourself. Pepper snorted behind Tony, covering his mouth and smiling. Tony shook his head, glared at her, and turned around with a charming smile. I said such a shameful line only because of your face. So how about you lend me that door frame to study for a few days? As soon as Tony returned home, Jawis asked Jawis to search for everything about Marvel Comics, and the final result was a comics company. Don't think about it, I'm just this door, and this advertisement is your life in exchange for it. It's too vulgar to talk about face. Shumo waved his hand when he heard it, and finally patted Tony on the shoulder. Here, this is the little bear biscuit I gave you. Go back and eat it. It's the only one in the world. He took out the cookie and stuffed it into Tony's pocket, making him a little confused. What the hell, if I talk to you about academics, you just send me a cookie and just one. Really, there are no such biscuits sold outside. Tony is very talkative, and for some people who are recognized by him, he can talk about anything, and if you are not recognized, the birds will not kill you. Is an extremely arrogant academic bully. Obviously Shumo was followed by him. As soon as he became interested, he ran over when he found the address the next day. Shumo, of course, welcomes Tony to be so active because of the cooperation. Besides, Tony is also pleasing to the eye. Apart from being a bit stinky, he is also happy to make friends. The two crossed their shoulders and walked towards the office in collusion. Not far away, Natasha looked at the backs of the two and frowned. After patrolling the surroundings, she walked to the bathroom single room alone, closed the door, and took out a small black bean from her sleeve and stuffed it into her ear socket. Director, I have something important to report. What's the matter? Have you found any clues? There is no clue yet, but Tony Stark came to Shumo and shot an advertisement. As an undercover agent, Natasha knew Shumo's situation well. According to the data, the two had no communication at all, and the industry was far apart. How can they know each other? Besides, I never saw the two appear together before. The one-eyed chief of the non-chief heard it, and he felt a knot in his heart. You must know that he was planning to become a SHI. After finding out how to deal with people, whether there will be conflicts in the team. This made him a little heartbroken. I was dying in my heart, and calmly said in a soft voice, perhaps Tony's escape from the desert is related to Shumo. If this is the case, Natasha, you must pay attention to your safety. Natasha responded, and took out the black beans and retracted her sleeves, and went out to wash her hands, showing a slight change on her face to look like she had finished using the toilet. Natasha responded, and took out the black beans and retracted her sleeves, and went out to wash her hands, showing a slight change on her face to look like she had finished using the toilet. Today is the day when a new issue of comics is released. As the Queen Marvel critic, Edward is staring at the foreword of Jump. An expression that makes me play. Then crackled on the keyboard and sent out a tweet. Juvenile Jump is facing a revision. Maybe many fans have not watched it or are a little confused. Here is a clear distinction. Edward then explained the future in a separate serialized form, and at the same time explained the pros and cons. Opening square bracket. Although the decision-making power is in the hands of the chairman and cartoonist, the voting function enabled by the magazine once a month allows us to participate in the sale of the booklet. Finally, the moment of excitement for fans of One Punch Man has arrived. Hurry up and open the XX website platform to let our new hero Saitama execute justice. The comments below are even more like oceans, and the small commentary is immediately squeezed to the bottom. Edward is a comic critic, but he does not comment on comics every week. Frequent reviews of the same comic are considered spoilers. Generally, comments are made when it is at a breaking point. Now the series of comics are all in the front part of the plot, and half of the short stories have not arrived. Jump's new comics can be said a lot. For example, this character named Luffy stretches his hands so long, Rubber Man. Strange title, a bit like Mr. Fantastic. Edward stroked his chin and flipped back and forth on the new comic. In this issue of Jump, two new comics appeared, one is One Piece, and the other is Fairy Tail. One Piece knows that he is the king of pirates when he hears the name. What Edward is depressed as this straw hat. Luffy's disposition is not bad. Can he be a pirate? Could it be possible that you will be abused later, start to hate hatred, change your personality, knock down the pirates to the ground, and then be crowned king? Edward shook his head, knowing he couldn't figure it out, and turned to the next new comic, which attracted his interest. Fairy Tail. At the beginning of the article, I talked about the background, the relationship between wizards, guilds, and countries in the wizarding world. He is not surprised by the setting of magic. Many heroic comics have also been involved before, but the 443 magic in it is a bit peculiar. The dragon-killing magic vomited directly from his mouth, the ice-shaped magic and dress-up magic rubbed by his hands, and the Protoss magic saw Edward look bewildered. Why is this magic completely different from the magic in the comics he has seen? However, Edward did not comment on these two comics. The beginning was a bit novel but not enough to cause heated discussion. I will read it later. Then he turned out. Friends Mank, the cover above shocked him, not that it is very exquisite, of course Edward knows what the definition of this magazine is. But this character is painted, too ancient. Whether it's on Jump or Doraemon's young cartoon, Terminator's realistic style is changeable but beautiful. The artist called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was extremely rough, which made him seem to be watching the first print version of Captain America. When I opened it, it looked a lot rougher than the cover. Hey, did you write it? Then he endured the pain in his eyes and looked down. After a while, his eyes suddenly popped out. Fack, what the hell is this? You thought your first kiss was JoJo, but it was Diorda. Crescent Moon Sky Chong. The lion plays. This time it's my hand pressing lightly. Oh yeah, I won. Bobby and John are playing. Shinigames, on the computer in the bedroom, and they enjoy it. Crunch. Pio, who was also a roommate, walked in sweating profusely, and saw that the two were struggling. He said silently, "Stop playing, Teacher Scott is going to test our training results tonight, you two seem to care nothing." Fireman John couldn't stop his hands with excitement, while Kaido, Pio is getting more and more refined, and there are other comic characters added. It's really refreshing. Poppy the Iceman even answered, "Yes, yeah, what's going on at night? What's the rush?" The two of them crackled on the keyboard, completely putting the reminder of Gangalashi behind their heads, and Gangalashi had to shook his head and said, "Regardless of you, I am not interested in comics." He also returned to the desk and turned on the computer. The school's learning atmosphere is very strong, but it does not mean that the management is very tight. Professor Charles generally teaches in the form of stalking. Computers and mobile phones will not be banned. Gang Lux first browsed on Twitter and Facebook, and there was a hot search that attracted his attention. Burning One Punch Man. Out of curiosity, he clicked in. It was an anime. Steel Lux doesn't like to read comics. There are a lot of comics, black and white, silent and motionless, and it doesn't seem to be substituting. Moreover, it has to wait a long time and produces few. He thinks that the Iceman and Fireman will be cleaned up by the professor if he spends his time reading comics every day. If he doesn't work hard and doesn't meet the test standards, Mr. Scott's face is not good looking. Closer to home, Gang Lux feels that anime is still acceptable, and the amount of manga can be read a few words in 20 minutes is much faster than chasing manga. At the beginning, it was a ruin. The protagonist was still a bald head. The villain was tall and terrifying, and Steel Lux felt that if the villain appeared too early, he always felt that the protagonist would be killed. "I'm just a hero of interest." Saitama's words came out of the computer, and Bobby John, who was in full play, raised his ears, and turned his head alone. "Pio, what do you think of anime? This is an adaptation of a manga. Stop talking nonsense, watching anime is much faster than your manga." Gangalashi cried out, letting the two of them play by themselves. Then, under the bewilderment of Steel Lux, Saitama blasted the vaccine man. Quote. "Why so fast?" Gangalashi exclaimed for a while, without any preparation in his heart. "Haha, Saitama teacher is super strong." John turned his head triumphantly and smiled. "Saitama, teacher, you'll know by looking at it." Gangalashi put his heart on the computer, and the theme song began to play, and the song, playing fat times, sang shakily. "This animation is really good." He quickly clicked on the next episode, and Bobby and John looked at each other and laughed in unison. Another jumped into the pit. Another jumped into the pit. Although Gangalashi is interested in the One Punch Man after watching the animation, he does not have the willingness to turn the comics. There are countless people like Gang Lux in the United States. Only some of them will go to the organization to buy comics to watch, and most of them will choose to wait for the next episode. According to their thinking, comics are still a waste of time and a lot of money. Just wait for the network to broadcast, saving time and money. Even if it is broken, there is no idea of going to read it. People like Gangalashi are very firm-minded and will not be affected by foreign objects. For example, factors such as emotions and enthusiasm can rarely drive their emotions. However, Shumo's goal of playing the animation has been achieved, and Gang Lux has become a fan at this moment, even the lowest ordinary fan. There is a lot of money, and it keeps making money. Gang Lux watched the 3 episodes very quickly, with some meaning that he was not interested in comics. Seeing the two people playing so hot, he couldn't help asking, "Is there a role in One Punch in this game?" Yes, there are Sonic, Genos, and the new weird Poseidon, which should be a late-stage character. I heard that in the future, we will cooperate with Stark Industries to transform it into a large-scale battle game, and there may even be a virtual battle mode called 300 Heroes, which specifically includes comic characters in the magazine. Virtual battle is not necessarily, it is too unrealistic, computer games can be done, I want to choose Teacher Saitama. Bobby and John finished each sentence in one sentence. Gang Lux couldn't wait to find this little game online, clicked it in, and started playing it. The 3 of them played until the evening, and it wasn't until the Phantom Cat came to inform them that the time had come. "It's over, underscore. When Bobby and John thought that they had been playing these days without any preparation, they frowned and walked into the training room listlessly. However, Steel Lux had lingering fears, and Ching himself was still somewhat prepared, so he didn't fail. The Phantom Cat couldn't figure it out, not knowing that they were so dejected and ruined them in. Since Shumo brought Tony back, a week has passed quickly. Every day is a calm day. It is worth mentioning that since I know that drawing prizes that are not involved in the release of the comics in advance will consume a lot of money, Shumo simply didn't draw all the prizes at once, and kept them until the animation follow-up started to explode and settled together. The animation was officially launched in 1 week and 3 episodes were directly broadcast. The response was enthusiastic. Uncle Andy has already communicated with the TV station and will be directly on TV when it is over. Shumo hasn't been doing nothing in the past few days. In addition to being a bit tight with Gwen and Gwen for days without narration, he also moved into a new house. The new house is still half delivered by Toe Stark at a discount, and there are just a few houses in the fringe effect area of Manhattan. Shumo bought it in a big breath, and Jin Muyan, who had been sleeping in the hotel, finally breathed a sigh of relief and finally had a home. Jinmu, you learned really fast. Natasha leaned over to compliment, and at the same time, she showed half of the car lights. Jin Muyan didn't change his color, looked directly at the monitor, and said politely, "It's nothing, you get it, I just understand it." Seeing the failure again, Natasha had to go back to her seat with a thump, and she was almost frantic with annoyance. For 2 weeks, there is no clue. Infiltrating Andy's office, except for the insignificant things, the manuscripts of the next issue. At first, he copied a part of them and was directly scolded by the director. "These manuscripts will be on sale in the future, what's the use of stealing this?" The frustrated Natasha not only doubted her charm, but also doubted that she was no longer suitable for acting as an agent. In the evening, Jin Mu walked out of the hotel alone with a small bag, ready to take a car home and take a shortcut into a small alley, outside as the big street. But the more you go, the darker the street becomes. A sense of depression is enveloped in this block. Pedestrians are gradually scarce. Some people leaning against the wall stand still and stare at the golden wood. Blade, what a sharp and nice name. Just as Jin Mu was walking halfway, a hoarse smile and a strong smell of blood came from one side of the alley. Crack, a crisp sound rang from under Jin Muyan's feet, and it was extremely loud in this quiet alley, almost everyone could hear it. All the people leaning against the wall narrowed their eyes, exuding a crimson color, like blood, looking at Jin Muyan in unison. Jin Muyan raised his brows, and walked on his own without any fear, and all his red eyes moved with it. "Kill him." At this moment, the previous voice came from the hutong, followed by a sound familiar to Jin Muyan from the hutong. "Let him go. It's just a pedestrian passing by. This is what happened before you and me." Jin Mu thoughtfully recalled that this voice seemed to have met a weird person while ordering coffee when he first joined the company last week. This man has a very sharp nose, he can smell human flesh on the spot, and he is ready to do it. Natasha's appearance dissolved the tension. It seemed that it was because she could smell the murderous smell on Natasha, and she seemed to be in the same group, so she chose to stop under various factors. "I didn't expect to encounter it here." It was obvious that Jin Mu was involved in the troublesome incident, and following an order, people around slowly approached. Their hideous faces, red eyes, slender fingers, and pale skin all show that these people are not ordinary people. It's better than ordinary people. Jin Mu stood still, staring at the surrounding movement with his eyes. Shumo once told him that if ordinary people are embarrassed, don't show the sign of ghoul. But if it's non-human, let it go and do it boldly. Jin Muyan suddenly widened his dark pupils, and 6 dark red alien limbs flew in the air on both sides of his back. The few people around were directly surprised and didn't expect that this ordinary person was not a human being, but a completely different kind. "It's a disaster from the sky, but if you want to kill me, it's up to you." Jin Muyan broke his fingers and stared coldly in the direction of the alley. As soon as the voice fell, the whole person rushed out like a bow and arrow from the string, and the black and red afterimages flashed again, and in a blink of an eye they came to a person. The person didn't react at all, and only felt a chill in his mouth, and he was pierced by Kazuko. What? At this time, there was a scream, the heart was directly beaten, and it fell to the ground, and the others hesitated when they were startled. In the dark alley, the voice is a little puzzled. The sound of footsteps from far and near, a pair of scarlet eyes, black hair, a red and black cloak with a three-leaf neckline, two thin beards, and sharp ears and tines larger than ordinary people. Strong man. Vampire. This was Jin Muyan's first thought after seeing it. This kind of sign is too obvious. I am the Lord of Vampires, de Couleur. Who are you? I have lived for nearly 6 centuries and I have never seen a species like you. De Couleur looked at Jin Muyan carefully with his eyes, especially Kazuko who was floating in the air, and asked with interest. He could see clearly in the dark. The rapid speed and powerful force were much stronger than those of his men. Jin Mu stared at de Couleur. His indifferent face spoke word by word. You don't need to know my name. He doesn't want to get involved with anyone who doesn't matter. It's a pity that vampires don't think so. How dare you be disrespectful to my lord? A vampire took a step forward, seemingly because the appearance of the host made him forget the scene of the same kind pounced on the street in a blink of an eye. The hesitant color on the faces of other vampires under the influence turned into fierce and evil spirits, and they stared at him. The hesitant color on the faces of other vampires under the influence turned into fierce and evil spirits, and they stared at him. De Couleur grinned even more, as if he heard some big joke. He raised his head and shouted, "Ha ha ha, no need. I'm not qualified, kid, you are really arrogant. Tear him to pieces, my servant." Following the command of de Couleur's abyssal cold, nearly 10 vampires surged up. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. These vampires act faster than ordinary people and have a little more strength, but for Jin Muyan, who is half gone and half heavy, it is a trivial matter. I saw Jin Mu sliding the dark red sharp Kazuko in the enclosing circle and quickly pierced out, hitting AJCB, the vital body. After a vampire's arm was pierced and torn down, blood spewed out from the place where the arm was broken, but some muscles began to stretch and converge, and gradually healed. However, his expression worsened. Just as his brows were overjoyed, a thorn suddenly passed through his head and burst into pieces like a watermelon. The fast-moving Jinmu smiled at this yawn, and immediately headshot when he saw signs of healing. Only then did the vampire's recovery ability stagnate and completely died. Pouch, pouch, pouch. With the popping sound of heads and hearts, countless blood splashed in the air and turned into blooming roses, incredibly gorgeous. Jin Mu is like a bloody Shira. Looking at the blood spilling in the air, he twitched his nose and tasted a little bit. Boom! Jin Mu Yanhei's organ throbbed suddenly, like a heartbeat, and the RC cells quickly became active. He squinted his eyes. This feeling can only be felt when he eats the same kind of blood. He didn't expect vampires to have so many RC cells. Unlike ghoul, vampires do not have a concentrated organ like hebao, but instead flow in the blood. Compared with the ghoul species, such evenly distributed RC cells are more inconvenient to swallow. Perhaps it is not necessarily a big bag to draw out a whole vampire blood. However, there is a stronger vampire. Thinking of Jin Muyan here, a smile was raised at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes exuded a weird light, as if he had discovered some delicious food. De Couleur was not surprised to see Jinmu pierce his servants 2 or 3 times, but it was more and more like the look he looked at food. Desire, bloodthirsty and rage. He has never been treated like this, he has always played with mortals. De Couleur, whose self-esteem was greatly humiliated, turned into anger, and his handsome face showed 2 fangs, and he shouted angrily. Boy, how dare you despise me so much? The speed surpassing ordinary people made him like a black shadow hiding in the darkness, approaching silently. The sharp nails stretched into claws, flashing cold light in the dark alleys, piercing the air, and the thin hands attacked Jin Muyan. Seeing this, Jin Mu remained silent, and the 4 line he greeted him, while the other 2 were waiting for the opportunity to move. Line he formed a sharp cone and collided with sharp claws in midair, and Daochen's sharp screams echoed in the alleys with the appearance of air rings that appeared frequently. Call out. Jin Mu seized an opportunity to let the remaining 2 violent pythons pierce through their side shoulders at a sharp angle. Laugh. Jin Mu took the opportunity to pull to the 2 sides, 2 blood flowers burst out, de Couleur's arms broke off the upper half, and they were tied together so that they would not fall to the ground. Well, de Couleur snorted in pain. The blood rushed through his arms. What made Jin Muyan stunned was that the arms that were about to be torn off unexpectedly formed cells out of thin air to form fleshy threads, and then faster and faster, and the arms that were intact as they were unfolded in front of him. This kind of regeneration ability is far better than him. That's why I live forever. I am immortal lord of vampires. Decooler shook his arms to move his muscles and bones, laughed. The entire popularity is like a rainbow, and the powerful regeneration allows him to face all enemies of life and death. Upon seeing this, Jin Mu snapped his fingers and gave a weird smile. Really? As soon as the voice fell, a small hole appeared in the same place, and the cracked cobweb-like slits opened and turned into an afterimage of leaps and bounds. Boom! The air burst, muffled, and exploded. Lin He waved his whip up, like a bright dark red pillar, and aimed at Decooler's head with 6 consecutive spikes. Far surpassing the limit speed that humans can capture, 6 consecutive piercings run through Decooler almost at the same time with an interval of less than 1 second. Ha! Decooler's head was wiped away like a corner on a map and completely disappeared. The next moment blood poured out from his neck like an exploding fountain. The headless corpse staggered and leaned against the wall to soften down. Jin Mu slowly stepped forward and stared with a dark pupil in his left eye. Zilu. A very strange voice was low and disgusting. Jin Mu's eyes flashed with shock, and an eyeball appeared above Decooler's neck, staring at Jin Mu. It was cold and shuddering. Then another eyeball appeared, 2 scarlet eyes extended to the surroundings. The human muscle cells began to grow, and blood vessels were pulled out at the neck of the severed head. This is the true immortality of Decooler. Rebirth cannot describe this. It can be said to be the curse of eternal life. In the alley, he limped on the wall and walked out of an embarrassed middle-aged strong man, a blade warrior, Eric Brooks. The blade warrior watched Decooler's head gradually healed with deep hatred in his eyes, and the silverware in his hand pierced his heart fiercely. His mother Miriam was bitten by a vampire when he was about to give birth to him, and died after he was born, so the blade warrior has a half-human and half-vampire lineage, and grew up to become a vampire hunter. His lifelong wish is to eradicate all vampires in the world. Only silverware can slightly slow down this recovery ability. Just as the pointed silverware was about to pierce the fierce chamber, the pale and slender hand directly clasped the wrist, and the powerful force made the blade warrior break away without letting go. I knew it. You always wanted to take advantage of the emptiness and wanted to kill me, but you always couldn't succeed. Decooler, whose head had returned to its original shape, grinned, and his slumping body suddenly stood upright as if violating the laws of physics, with a fierce wave of his hand, and slammed into the wall. The crashing gravel buried the crippled blade. What if I know it? I am the undead king, no one can kill me. Decooler patted the dust on his body, showing the gentleman's hands spread out slightly. With his flowing thin beard and this breezy look, he was completely different from the loser who fell into the wind just now. Not dead. This is really good. Jin Mu's expressionless expression seemed to compliment him, but he was happy in his heart. RC cells exist in both humans and ghoul species, but the content of ghoul species far exceeds that of humans. Does an immortal vampire mean an endless bag? Jin Mu has some expectations. Jin Mu didn't intend to kill Decooler, it was not good for him at all. 2 of the Kazuko dancing in the air began to deform, and the blue veins on his face burst out slightly. Crack. The heteromorphic limbs on both sides of the waist gradually deform, and the white sharp feet protrude from the side ends, and the surface is covered with a thick carapace, which is completely different from the other 4 kazas. Like 2 centipedes hovering between their waists, Hanmang's sharp claws flashed, revealing a stern Jin Muyan snorted, looking at Decooler hesitantly, like a food that can never be eaten. Like 2 centipedes hovering between their waists, Hanmang's sharp claws flashed, revealing a stern Jin Muyan snorted, looking at Decooler hesitantly, like a food that can never be eaten. Decooler is very keen on light, and the look in his eyes that Kai Guogo swallowed made his heart burst into anger like magma. Boy! Decooler stretched his hands, his entire skin darkened, his pale white disappeared completely, his clothes were torn apart, his body suddenly solidified with wings and wings connected to his hands, his body soared, and he turned into a big bat in a blink of an eye. 2 wolf-like fangs burst out, the hands on the wings became dead gray, and the nails doubled. Roar! I want to suck up all your blood and become a corpse. The big bat Decooler opened his mouth wide, and roared like a beast, spreading his wings to cover the dusk. Squeak. The bats in the distance formed a team, and the black bats that covered the sky crowed and hovered beside Decooler. Suck him dry, my baby. The group of bats swarmed down, gnawing at the golden wood with their fangs. Upon seeing this, Jin Mu shook his head and sneered, little trick. Luganline he suffered a large number of deaths and injuries just by waving his tail. After a few moments, he was emptied, and only the limbs of the bats fell all over the sky. Call out, don't be me. Behind the black bat team, Decooler waved his wings, and the sound of the wind stirred the wind and cloud, tearing it towards the golden wood. Madness. Jin Mu flashed a backflip, flicking the centipede Kazuko and hitting Decooler's chin like a fierce beast. With this size, he doesn't need to aim at all at his speed. However, defense and strength have risen a lot. Jin Mu looked back at the 3 deep cracks on the surface of the ground, and thought a little. Immediately after the Jin Muru bullet shot out to fight Decooler in close combat, the scales repeatedly jabbed the big and small blood hole bats and couldn't stop the weaker than the wind. Then, the blade warrior got up from the ruins, threw out the cone-shaped silverware and threw it at the golden wood. A little bat flew out from under the eaves to stop it, but was beaten into mud by a whip and caught like a hand in a cloud. Hey, boy, I won't let you go. Cooler, the big bat, was a little afraid of silverware when he saw this. The speed of golden wood is too fast and the explosive power is high. He can't beat it. Relying on eternal regeneration, he isn't immune to death Xiaoqiang. However, he won't run if he can't beat them. Go outside and hide for a while. When Decooler fluttered his wings again to escape, a black and red figure bounced from the roof, and a cold light flashed. The silverware pierced the fierce chamber and pierced the heart. The big bat Decooler only felt chilly, and the night of blood began to freeze, and his limbs fell weakly. Puff. Jin Mu strode forward, leaning over and watching the big bat's heart pierced, and there was a trace of breath, really immortal. There was a cruel smile at the corner of his mouth. How much is 1000-7? This big bat is tender and fat, and is a little sick now, how about it? After all, I am not a devil either. Quote. The scene fell into silence. How much is 1000-7? What's the meaning of this? The blade warrior put on sunglasses without lenses and fell into deep thought. Decooler had a sharp pain in his mouth, his heart was stabbed by silverware, all his recovery ability became stagnant, and the shape of the bat returned to its human form, and he was still hanging himself. What does 993 imply? He opened his mouth and tried to say, it's equal to 993. The sound of finger breaking. Snapped. A hezzy whip on Decooler's face. Jin Muyan asked again, how much is 999-7? Snapped. 992. Decooler wailed eagerly. Snapped. Keep it down, how much is it? Snapped. What? 991. August 17, 990. Quote. The Lin Hyuk that Jin Muyan wielded flogged all over Decooler's body time and time again, and Decooler became a pile of rotten bones after the rebirth was not overwhelming. The bleak wailing and the horrible way of torture made the blade soldier on the side pleasing to the eyes at first, and he wished to continue like this, but later he listened more and more. Shudder. It was not because of Cooler's painful cry, but the madness of this white-haired boy that made his heart tremble. You know, the two almost fell on each other last time. Snapped. 882. Decooler's breath became smaller and smaller, until nothing. After Jin Muyan finished snapping his brows one by one, he said depressed, dead. It was too casual to reach 882. He was still unsatisfied, ready to put Hezi away, ready to draw some blood to make up for his exhaustion. At this time, the blade soldier hurriedly interjected. The heart can only be regarded as a weakness of Decooler's immortality, but it is not a fatal weakness. Decooler is not dead now. Jin Muyan listened, looked at the blade warrior, and sneered, it seems you know a lot. The blade soldier responded with a dry smile, squatting up, grabbing the end of the silverware and gently lifting it up and away from the position of the heart. Call. Decooler's eyes widened, his limbs twitched, and the wound on his body recovered miraculously, which really shocked Jin Muyan. Are you still dead? The blade warrior hurriedly stabbed back, bursting with a muffled sound, and Decooler no longer convulsed and turned into a weak state. Just pull up the silverware, the heart will be restored, and Germany Cooler will be resurrected. The Blade Warrior stood up and sighed, saying that every vampire hunter thought he had completely killed de Cooler, but in the end he was killed by de Cooler one by one. He guessed this by summarizing it, and it really was so. This is just right, this endless hebao is not cool enough. When Jin Mu became interested, Lin He threw the whip on de Cooler again, another tragic scream, which made the blade stand aside and couldn't bear to look straight. This time, de Cooler didn't bother to say the numbers, anyway, you have to die, just hit it. Snapped, snapped, snapped. Not long after, de Cooler died again. But Jin Mu was dissatisfied, and there was no meaning in the numbers without the numbers. A little disappointed, he pulled out the silverware and immediately pierced it in. But Jin Mu was dissatisfied, and there was no meaning in the numbers without the numbers. A little disappointed, he pulled out the silverware and immediately pierced it in. Ha, you devil! The resurrected de Cooler opened his eyes and scolded. He has never met anyone more perverted than him. Thanks for the exaggeration. Well, it seems boring, so be it. Jin Muyin folded Hezi expressionlessly, looked down at de Cooler, and raised one hand. You. When the blade was about to ask what to do later, he only heard a puff. Jin Muyin's hand pierced de Cooler's fierce voice directly. Immediately after 5 fingers and a fish, the thick blood was smashed in his hands, a little spilled, and then Jin Mu directly drank in. When the blade saw this, his liver was severely cracked, and he shouted in horror, "What are you doing? Vampire blood has the effect of inducing human beings to become vampires. Why is this white-haired boy so strange that he is not afraid to become a vampire?" De Cooler yelled in pain, and laughed when he saw Jin Mu's behavior. "Ha ha, I didn't expect you to worship vampires so much." In his opinion, only enthusiastic admirers would take the initiative to swallow the blood of a vampire, and excessive blood would cause it to burst and die. Sure enough, stupid human beings. Do you think I am human? After tasting the golden wood, the cells of the whole body are in an active state, and endless RC factors are cheering. This is evolving. He is condescending to look down on Germany Cooler. Admirer, I am ignorant, I just treat you as an endless granary. De Cooler's arrogant laughter stagnated, and his complexion was dumbfounded. Some people even regarded him as food. The previous craving for food was real. No, you are never allowed to do this, you are humiliating the great vampire lord. Snapped. De Cooler roared hysterically, and then gave him a slap in the face. It seems you haven't seen the facts clearly yet. Jin Muyin touched his chin, and once again swung Kazuko to beat Cooler so badly. This time he didn't pull out the silverware and just pierced it like this. Then Jin Mu took out a big black bag from his backpack, and then beat de Cooler into a ball and stuffed it in, holding it in his hand. The blade sniffed, his dark face was pale, and the smell of blood from the bag made him gag. Why, did you smell it again? Jin Muyin glanced at it and said playfully. This bag is a must-have for him when he goes out. It is a tableware for food. There are always people in the United States who can't think of it. Tenten's search for death just filled his stomach. No, I didn't smell it. Blade's back was in a cold sweat by this look, a little dazed, and bitterly denied. If this is like the last time, but without Natasha to relieve the siege, the end will be worse than the German Cooler in this bag. Jin Mu sneered and walked out of the alley swaggeringly, carrying the black bag. The blade looked at his back, looking thin, but he didn't expect to see such a scene, so terrifying. Then he took out the silver water and sprinkled it on the stumps of Xiaomiao to start the finishing work. Manhattan District. A villa was brightly lit, and Shumo watched the TV report leisurely. The councillors above were intensively implementing the mutant registration bill. A strong smell of blood entered the nose, and then with a crunch, Jinmu opened the door and walked in with the bag. Jinmu, this is the Lord of Vampires, it seems to be called Della. Jinmu hesitated to say his name, perhaps because he didn't pay attention to it, and some omissions. Untied the bag to reveal a meatball with silverware pierced in it, making Shumo dumbfounded. Then Jinmu talked about the matter. The endless bag. This is a rare thing. Shumo nodded, expressing his approval of this practice, but the smell is a bit permeating, and it is not good to keep it in the house. There is a basement, just lock it in. Then he thought, and Jinmu came to the dark basement, which was empty, and there was a big rock, and threw it directly on it. Shumo scratched his head and went out without any interest in seeing how Jinmu swallowed. Before sitting on the sofa, Skynet Alice projected from the phone. The task of T-800 has been completed, the address and screen have been transmitted, open the door. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.